Thank you very much. Please take a seat. Welcome to this meeting of Oxford City Council. Please note this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Members, please make sure your phone is either turned off or silent. And you may leave and come back at any time, but please indicate to the clerk if leaving completely. As this meeting is to set the budget for 2024-2025, please know our proceedings will be different to usual. You have to smile. Please note that as Lord Mayor, I have the casting vote on any tied vote this evening, and I reserve the right to use this. Okay, starting off, item 1, apologies for absence. Can I request the committee and member services manager to announce any apologies that have been received ahead of this meeting?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've received apologies from councillors Alistair Morris, Tom Hayes, Amar Latif, Joe Sanderson, Imogen Thomas and Dicko Walcott. And I should note Councillor Kerr might be late.
Thank you. Item 2, members, do you have any declarations of interest relating to business in today's agenda? I see hand up, Councillor Malik.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 6, I think, whatever they are, ABCD, with the taxi licensing, etc., because I'm a taxi driver.
Thank you. Who else? No? Okay. Members, if any subsequent interests become apparent, please raise it at the relevant item. We now come to item item 3, announcements. I met with the Duke of Edinburgh as he visited Oxford. It was really good, actually.
Did you took a selfie?
I managed to get a group picture. He visited Oxford and he came to the Story Museum, and then we went to the old fire station, and later on he went to Flows in the Park. And he asked a lot of really good questions, and he had a good time. Okay, so moving on, I understand the Leader of the Council. Do you have any announcements?
I do not.
Okay. Anyone else? No. Okay, so members, the budget debate procedure is laid out within the agenda pack. Do we agree to follow this procedure this evening? Thank you. I now move to item 5, which is public addresses and questions that relate to matters for decisions at this meeting. I can confirm we have not received any ahead of this meeting. Thanks a lot. We now come to the recommendations from the licensing committees. Can Councillor Mary Clarkson, Chair of the Licensing and Gambling Acts Committee, move the report and committee's recommendations?
Yes, all the increases are...
You just need to...
Sorry about that. Yes, Lord Mayor, the increases that are in front of you have been approved by the Licensing Committee, and they are very much, they're in line with inflation, so there's no changes. So I will just ask Council to note these and to approve them. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Edward Mundy. Okay. Are there any other speakers for this item? No? Okay. I will put the decision to the vote. Please can I request that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise. Those in favour? Thank you. And those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The recommendations have been approved. We now come to the next recommendation. Can Councillor Ed Mundy, Chair of the General Purposes Licensing Committee, move the report and the committee's recommendations?
Hi everybody. So similarly, obviously the committee unanimously agreed these fees and charges, and indeed the amendment to the charges list, which reflects the fact that obviously our fees and charges have to reflect the cost of actually delivering and enforcing those services. But one thing of note is that we have aligned the charges for street cafe licences and pavement licences so that there isn't an inconsistency there. And the committee did have to undertake some semi-complicated maths in order to ensure that one-year licences lined up with two-year licences at the same rate. So I do hope that Council will appreciate that and vote this unanimously. Thank you.
Can we have a seconder? Councillor Mark Ligo. Thank you. Are there any other speakers for this item? I will put the decision to the vote. Please can I request that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise. Thank you. Those in favour? That looks unanimous, but just in case. Those against? Any abstentions? Looks like that's been, thank you, recommendations have been approved. Okay, we now come to the next recommendation. Can Councillor Ed Mundy, Chair of the General Purposes Licensing Committee, move the report and the committee's recommendations?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So here we have the Hackney Carriage tariff list, which we're driven by trade when it comes to increasing these tariffs, and they are reflective of rates of inflation. One thing of note is that we have historically been one of the few authorities in the country that have not allowed the Hackney carriages to use the highest tariff, Tariff 3, outside of the precise Christmas period, Christmas and New Year. We've now changed that so that during normal days, during the night, I forget the exact hours, but it's in the report, that Hackney carriage drivers will be able to charge Tariff 3, which is the highest tariff, and obviously it does ensure that they'll be able to undertake those duties and obviously offer the nighttime economy, that transport that's so important. Also note that the DBS application fees are now outsourced effectively, so that's another change in there. And that's the main thing there. I'm happy to take any questions on that, but obviously this has been approved at the Licensing Committee as well. Thank you.
Can we have a seconder? Councillor Mary? Is that Councillor Mary Clarkson, are you seconding?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other speakers for this item? No. Okay, I will put the decision to the vote. Please may I request that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you. The recommendations have been approved. We now come to the final recommendation from the licensing committees. Can Councillor Ed Mundy, Chair of the General Purposes Licensing Committee, move the report and the committee's recommendations?
Apologies, Lord Mayor, I've not kept up to date with which report.
60, endorsement or variation increase.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I spoke to that earlier. My previous comments apply to this report. My apologies, Council. This has been approved at the Licensing Committee, as I said, and I do appreciate that Council approves that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder? Councillor Mark Liger saw first. Are there any other speakers for this item? put the decision to the vote. Please can I request that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you. That recommendation has been approved. Okay. We now come to the Chief Finance Officer's report on the Council's proposed budget. Please may I request Nigel Kennedy, Section 151 Officer, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is my report to the Council, prepared in my capacity as the Council Section 151 Officer in accordance with Section 25 of the Local Government Act 2003. It specifically looks at the robustness of the estimates and also the adequacy of our proposed financial reserves. And the Council, in considering its budget, should have regard of this advice and also the financial position. In terms of the robustness of estimates, as in previous years, the estimates for income expenditure for the 4-year period, April 24 to March 28, have been scrutinised by initially the finance team, directors, chief executive, exec members, and also the scrutiny committee's finance panel, which presented its findings and recommendations to Cabinet in February, with all 130 plus questions of challenge. However, the estimates in the budget are just that. They are based on factors existing at a point in time, and the judgment of professional officers as to how these factors may change over time. The Oxford model relies on income streams, and this in turn increases the risk of the overall budget, where we cannot say for certain how these income streams will play out, since a number of these rely on factors outside the control of the Council, as interest rates, inflation, elasticity of demand, to name but a few. But I am confident that the estimates do provide and do represent our best estimate of what is likely to be in the future, and therefore are robust. There is still uncertainty, however, around fairer funding and business rates reset, which the government said last year would be put off until 25-26. However, when they gave the recent finance settlement, there was no mention of business rates reset. There are also looming issues ahead for the Council and other councils in respect of temporary accommodation. This uncertainty plays into the assessment of the adequacy of reserves, the second part of the report. There's no scientific calculation to what the level of reserves are adequate. CIPFA, the local government accounting body, do produce some information which shows wide variation in different local authorities on the amount of reserves held. But in reality, the amount required is a matter of risk-assessed judgment, depending on the risk profile of the individual authority. The Oxford model is inherently more risky than a traditional cost-cutting model. We rely on income streams to maintain our services, and these risks were all too apparent when COVID hit in 2020, with many of those income streams reducing significantly. It is nonetheless a model which has served this Council well over the previous years. Whilst we are now hopefully out of the shadow of COVID, the financial markets remain volatile, with inflation still struggling to get back to the government target of 2%, and bank base rates at record highs, meaning that we still need to be cautious on the use of our reserves. This year, the Council was asked to approve some potential unpalatable reductions in service provision, albeit the majority of these savings will be in 25-26. The budget pressures are such that these currently cannot be avoided, even though I've mitigated these to some extent by the use of £7 million worth of our reserves over the coming 4-year period. We do have an unallocated general fund reserve of around 3.6 million, and in addition to that, usable earmark reserves which are planned to reduce by around 40% over the coming period to around 22 million. And these will largely arising from the use of these from the capital programme and other budgetary pressures. Whilst I would certainly guard against any further substantial draw on these reserves over the life of the MTFP, I do feel that at this point in time the reserves are currently adequate to protect the Council's financial position over the next 4-year period. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers for this item? No? Is that report noted? Say aye. Okay, we now come to the report from the Scrutiny Budget Review Group. Can I remind members that appendices B and C are restricted and we require to proceed to closed session if any members want to discuss these items. Councillor James Fry, Chair of the Budget Review Group, can you kindly introduce the report?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. This is always a particularly antisocial time, our meetings. They're always sort of starting before Christmas and all through January, but I wanted, as always, to give special thanks to the panel members who work very hard, and you know probably they're also members of the finance panel, which meets also around the same time. And I wanted to thank the officers who gave a lot of time, but most especially Nigel Kennedy and Alice Courtney, who's not here today, but managed to write up and summarise the recommendations from each of our meetings. I didn't actually count the full number of questions, but Nigel has just reminded me it was over 130, a record that came from our deliberations, but I do believe, I hope the officers agree, that the iterations with them were useful in arriving at a final set of proposals. I think you all know the background to local government finance is dreadful, and we've heard, which is true, the Oxford model has definitely held us in good stead, and the new leisure contract, which was only agreed right at the end of the budget round, proved better financially than we'd actually feared. I'm particularly pleased, and I'm sure this reflects the views of the other panel members, that we haven't resorted to the strategy adopted by some other hard-pressed councils, and I would say the national government, of setting only a one-year budget, which is balanced, and then to try to push all the pain into subsequent years. But we have, as always, a balanced budget over the full 4 years of the medium-term financial plan. So I would like to conclude by praising the process. I feel it was very constructive, helpful, and there was a remarkable degree of unanimity. I hope the other panel members agree when we came to our final report. So thank you very much.
Are there any speakers for this item? Is the report noted? Thank you. The next item is the Medium-Term Financial Strategy 2025-2026 and 2024 to 2025 budget. Can I please request Councillor Ed Turner, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Finance and Asset Management, to introduce the report.
Thanks very much indeed, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, fellow councillors, this is a very, very difficult time to be presenting a council budget. The global situation is truly wretched. An appalling civil war in Yemen, the catastrophic effects of climate change becoming ever more obvious, war in Europe with Russia's outrageous aggression, and the terrible, terrible conflict in Gaza, which I know has touched many in this chamber. We were all moved by the public addresses we heard at our recent council meeting, and I also want to acknowledge that this conflict has led to many good councillors leaving the Labour group. As I think you all know, that really saddens me, and I respect the judgment and decision of those who took this step. As far as I'm concerned, we remain friends, and I know in this chamber, this afternoon we will all, regardless of party background, and I mean by this all councillors, have good, comradely, constructive and respectful debate. The domestic context for our council budget is also exceptionally difficult. Against this backdrop, yet again, our council officers have risen to the challenge. I want to highlight 3 things here. First, since the publication of our consultation budget, we've agreed a new pay deal with our trade unions, Unison and Unite. Now, this has happened in circumstances where staff across the public sector have had years of pay restraint, and many are confronted very personally and in their families with the cost of living crisis. To get an agreement and such a strong yes vote from both unions is excellent and testimony to our close relationship. Long may that continue. Secondly, our council officers from around our authority have come up with savings proposals. Some have required ingenuity, others have required painful, difficult suggestions, and it's testimony to their professionalism that they put forward proposals that, in truth, they often hope are not endorsed. Thank you to you all, and particularly thank you to Caroline for your leadership. Thirdly, the finance team, led by Nigel Penley, has shepherded the budget through with the usual mixture of diligence, efficiency and wisdom. Frankly, Nigel, I don't know where we'd be without you and your colleagues. I also want to thank Scrutiny for your painstaking attention to the budget. I think this really adds valuable challenge to the process. Thank you, James, and thank you all. Why is the context so difficult? Well, it's my view that austerity is not a situation, it's a political choice. And the political choice that we owe to the likes of David Cameron, George Osborne, Nick Clegg and of course Rishi Sunak. Since 2010, councils have lost 27% of their funding in real terms, with government grants falling at a much sharper a rate. In addition, we face pressures from double-digit inflation, which hasn't gone away. Prices have gone up for good, and prices are still rising. Energy costs have sharply increased, and interest rates have also risen. The world would be a much better place, frankly, if Caroline and Nigel had been running the economy, rather than Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. Last year's budget was hard enough, but the inflationary pressures have really worked their way through and given us some deeply difficult decisions to make this afternoon. So where are we? Well, as James just pointed out, we've proposed a balanced budget in MTFS over the next 4 years. Our assumptions are reasonable, but we should also be clear that we will draw on reserves, as Nigel just reminded us, to the tune of £6.9 million over the coming 5 years, taking us really as low as we want to go. Candidly, given the risky climate in which we operate, I'd rather we drew less on reserves. But we have to strike the right balance, Lord Mayor, between providing services now and being prepared for future and welcome developments. We should remember that given the absolute crisis in local government, with bankruptcies amongst councils ranging from Birmingham to Woking to Thurrock to Nottingham, being able to set a balanced budget not just for 1 year but for 4 is a remarkable achievement. And we do this with so little help from the government. Members will note that we received an extra £243,000 as a one-off from the government in an announcement that Michael Gove gleefully trumpeted as showing he was in our corner. Well, how nice of him, funding which barely covers the cost we face, as he's also banned us from charging extra council tax on second homes until the year after next. Funding which accounts for less than 0.3% of our gross budget, and funding for which they have the cheek to demand some sort of efficiency plan is submitted to them, and to tell us, in just the latest instance of this reprehensible government's attempt to sow division in our communities, that we'd be more efficient if we sack the people who lead on making our workforce more diverse. Well, we don't think that'd be more efficient. We think across this chamber, I hope, that diverse workforces are the best workforces, and we will keep striving to see that our council workforce reflects the communities it serves. Let's just stand as a council as one against this divisive nonsense. Yeah. Once again, at the heart of this budget is the Oxford model. As a thought experiment, I'd ask members to consider what our budget would look like without the Oxford model. That is, without the income from our wholly owned companies. We'd be talking about a shortfall of some £4.5 million every year, an absolutely eye-watering figure, quite apart from the income from our property portfolio, which brings in over £12 million a year. The Oxford model means that we are, in the slogan of ODS, doing good through our company activity, serving our communities and also bringing in a return for the council. Without this £4.5 million a year, we could forget about council grants to local groups, forget about new community centres, forget about youth ambition. We'd be reduced to providing a minimum rump of services and leaving it to private citizens to do the rest. That's the Conservative model, which they'd like local government to do, and it's one which we in this chamber profoundly reject. Let me turn to a few key areas of our company activity. One of them is housing. In this budget, we provision for over 1,600 new council and social homes. Now, I know personally, I think many of us will, people who've moved into some of our new homes. I've known people living in woeful accommodation, causing physical and mental illness and ripping families apart. I know that in every one of those homes, we'll see a household, whether it's a single person or a family, transformed. I think we all know that sometimes it's not easy to support housing. There aren't many people who say openly, I'm just against new housing in Oxford, in the general terms. But there are plenty who'll say that this or that development is in the wrong place, or it's the wrong design, or it should be done somewhere else. And they're often very vocal and very articulate in doing so. And that's fine. You know, it's a free country, it's a free city. We welcome challenge, we welcome debate. But please also remember, when we're discussing new housing, and particularly new council and other social housing, that there are other voices. They're the voices of those who are overcrowded. They're the voices of those in temporary accommodation or hotels, or the voices of those who are struggling to move on from homeless hostels. Those voices are quiet. In public debate, they're often almost silent. But to me, to us, they matter every bit as much, and indeed they should probably matter a little bit more. And we should also bear in mind that our housing crisis is getting worse. We're facing unprecedented levels of pressure on our temporary accommodation stock. Cabinet will soon be considering a report setting out just how grave the situation is becoming. As another aspect of that deliberate political choice, austerity, manifested in the freeze of housing benefit rates, as well as the rise in interest rates, mean that more and more people, without any fault of their own, are losing their homes. I know our officers are doing all they can in these dire circumstances to support those who need it, but the best form of support we can give is building new social and council housing. And when I vote for this budget, it's probably those 1,600 new homes that will give me the biggest pride in doing so. Let me highlight another crucial aspect of our budget, our capital programme. Taken together, we've got a fantastic amount of capital expenditure, over £750 million in the MTFS period. We should bear in mind the huge benefits that this brings to our local economy and our local people. We take social value into account in assessing bids to do work, and of course some of the work goes to OES, retaining value in the council rather than seeing it go outside. And vitally, of course, we put the highest emphasis we can on the Oxford living wage in our procurement policies. This capital programme will support some outstanding projects. Just to take an example, we've got the covered market master plan. Not only is this going to transform the covered market and give a real boost to that whole part of the city centre, including other retailers as well, but it will also ensure the financial sustainability of the market in the long term, providing an income stream, which we really need for our services. Well, on a much smaller note, we've got a proposed investment in a new splash pump in Hicksey Park. Now, I make no apology for prioritising that, even in these really difficult times. Something like a splash park is a brilliant attraction, a free attraction for families, including those who don't have the funds for more elaborate trips further afield, and so we're really glad to prioritise it. We're also proposing a new investment in the fabric of our leisure centres, much needed, and it seems to me that along with the new agreement on the delivery for our centres, it's a vote of confidence in the full range of our facilities, at a time when up and down the country, centres are being closed. The same, of course, goes for community centres, and we've got our new community centres funded here on the Lees and in East Oxford. In the context of our climate emergency, another grave concern, there's very substantial investment here of £33 million in energy efficiency measures for council properties, as well, of course, as the Cowley branch line feasibility work, which is essential as part of the sustainable transport infrastructure for people who live and work in Oxford, and it really can't come soon enough. Lastly, Lord Mayor, I'd like to turn to the amendment, which is tabled in my name. I think it's 9A on the agenda. We took the opportunity to reflect on perspectives from different opposition groups, and we're keen that as a council we take on board a range of different views. It was only with a very heavy heart that we even proposed considering lowering the level of council tax reduction for working age households on low incomes. We're very glad to propose in our amendment to reinstating this in full for the MTFS period. Now that comes at a cost. We'll need to look for further savings in the communities area, which will be challenging, though we're also looking to achieve some savings on the cost of allowances for the Cabinet and through the disposal of items like the Moral Trophy, which is simply locked away in the Town Hall out of public view. We hope that by moving this amendment, we can demonstrate that the administration is willing to act in the spirit of consensus, which these very difficult times demand. I note that the Green Group has proposed mitigating some of the other reductions, some of the reductions we don't want to make, with increased car park charges from year 2 onwards. Obviously, we're going to discuss this later on. Suffice to say, this is something we'll be glad to look at, but at this stage we feel it would be rash to bank the extra money before we've implemented this year's increases. As I say, rest assured it's something we're certainly open to considering. Lord Mayor, we won't agree on everything today. Well, we might, but it'd be very nice to do, but I don't think we will. I think there'll be some disagreement, and there might be some votes. I also think that the relative consensus, though, which is shown by all of the groups in tabling amendments, testifies to the fact that as a council, we've got plenty in common. We really appreciate together the seriousness of the situation we face as a council, that households face in our city, and indeed that's faced globally in these really troubling times, and that we're willing to stand together to resolve these difficult challenges. Let's just hold on to the positives here. In the face of a brutal ideological assault led by a government that doesn't care, we're investing. We're building new council homes. We're improving our community facilities. We're tackling the climate emergency, and we're bending over backwards to safeguard support for those on the lowest incomes. This has been a really hard budget to set, and there's still some proposals in there, Lord Mayor, which we'd really much rather not have been forced to table. But still, it's a budget that will serve people in Oxford well, and that's why I commend it to the Council this afternoon.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Susan Brown?
Lord Mayor, I'm formally seconding it at this point in time, but reserving my right to speak.
Okay, we now move to the amendments. Can I remind members we have 33 minutes for this item. Any time saved can be used at the end of the debate. I will now request Councillor Chris Smoten to introduce the Liberal Democrat budget proposal.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. A few weeks ago, we debated the committee system, and I noted then that when there is an overall majority, it's right that parties should assemble a consensus on the issues before Council. I'm glad to see that is what has happened today, with the vast majority of our budget amendment absorbed into the Labour Group's budget amendment that was just advanced in Councillor Turner's name. This could have been a game of chicken, with groups daring each other to allow the budget to fall. You've chosen not to make it so genuinely, thank you for doing that. I'm particularly glad that we're elevating council tax reduction to top priority. There are no good choices in this round of budgeting, but I really do think it's right that we strain every sinew in the forthcoming communities review and economise on our own cabinet costs before we look at taking extra tax from the lowest earning households. I'm also glad to see us putting useless but valuable items like the Moral Hunting Trophy to better purpose, reducing our need to borrow, when otherwise it just gathers dust, and I wholeheartedly endorse expanding the remit of that review beyond that single item. Lord Mayor, there being little of our budget amendment that has not already been incorporated into the amendment just passed, I will formally withdraw the proposed Liberal Democrat amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Smoten? Okay.
Probably not.
Lord, is that working? Yeah. Lord Mayor, if I may, the Liberal Democrat amendment has been accepted by Councillor Turner in the proposal of his recommendation concerns the sale of the Moral Trophy in year 1. The proposed amendments by the Green Group and an individual amendment that we've got on the agenda propose the sale of the item in year 2. That means that the proposals in the amendments proposed by the Green Group and by the individual amendment therefore are not financially balanced as compared to what is now the recommendation on the table. As such, I would propose a 15-minute amendment so that the Green Group may consider their proposed amendments in light of what's now just in light of what's now just being proposed by Councillor Turner.
Okay, just to be clear, adjournment for 15 minutes starts now. members, we have 33 minutes for this item. Any time saved can be used at the end of the debate. I will now request Councillor Chris Jarvis to introduce the Green Budget proposal.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, that was an exciting development for us all. I don't think people have had the amendment circulated with the revision that we've just discussed, but just before I talk, just to give you clarity, our amendment is being amended for a second time, so that the sale of Morale Trophy line in the top section of the amendment would instead read sale of the FC1 number plate, and the corresponding figure is 160 as opposed to 185. What that means is that there's net increase in reserves of 27k over the course of the MTFP with our amendment, as opposed to the net 52k that was in the original amendment. Hope that is clear. So I'd like to start in a similar vein to Councillor Turner in his comments earlier by thanking officers for the huge amount of work that has gone into the preparation of this year's budget. I would also similarly like to thank the Budget Review Group and the members of that who spent many, many hours scrutinising the administration's proposals in the dark days of January. I think similarly to the comments made by Councillor Turner earlier, I don't think we can have the discussion about this budget without acknowledging the scale of the challenge local authorities, including this one, are facing when it comes to their finances. Since 2010, local government has been under assault from central government, with austerity having made it all but impossible for councils like ours to deliver the kind of public services we would want to and the transformation in people's lives that we should be able to. That's only been compounded by 14 years of reckless economic policy, which has driven increased pressure on our services. The cost of living crisis and a lack of protection for private renters, driving spiralling homelessness and a rising need for temporary accommodation is the most pressing example of this, but it is only the latest in a long, long list. But despite this context, it's also true that local government does have powers at its disposal to alleviate poverty, reduce inequality and reduce the impacts of central government policies on residents in our city. Indeed, this council has a strong history of doing just this in a multitude of ways, even in the face of more than a decade of austerity and attacks on local government. This year, the Green Group's amendment to the budget and MTFP has that drive to reduce inequality and poverty at its heart. Our amendment proposed to stop the reduction in the council tax reduction scheme initially put forward as part of the administration's budget. This scheme is a crucial lifeline for many of the people in our city who are struggling the most, and it should be preserved. And so we're grateful to the administration for recognising the strength of feeling from across the council to preserve this. And I'd like to echo many of the comments made by Councillor Smoten earlier, but we believe that there are better ways of financing it than through cutting the community's budget, which is why we have sought to reverse that in our revised amendment. While protecting the council tax reduction scheme was an important part of our initial amendment, we are also seeking to stop other measures in the budget and the MTFP, which we believe will adversely affect the least well off in our city. That includes dropping planned increases in bulky waste collection and the concessionary rate for garden waste bins. Both of these savings, as part of the administration's budget, are very small and yet would add an unnecessary financial burden on residents while risking negative environmental impacts, including increased burning of green waste and fly tipping. We also believe that the proposed cuts to voluntary sector grants will have a negative impact on our city, and so our budget amendment proposes to reinstate 150k into this budget line across 3 years. In addition to seeking to reverse elements of the administration's proposals, which we think will hit those who have the least hardest, our budget amendment is also proposing new spending dedicated to tackling inequality and alleviating poverty in our city. We are proposing introducing a discretionary hardship fund, money that can be used by the council in a targeted way to provide some alleviation for the cost of living crisis for those in our city who have been hit hardest. We've intentionally left this as a centrally held fund which could be distributed to service areas as needed, in recognition of the unpredictability in the economy at the moment and as the way in which the cost of living crisis impacting people continues to change. While the amount of money we're proposing to allocate here is relatively small in the grand scheme of the council's budget, its impact on individual residents would nonetheless be significant. Now, we're proposing to finance these additional costs on the budget in the following ways. Firstly, by introducing charging for the first hour at park and rides. Secondly, introducing a greater increase on car parks from year 2 of the MTFP. Thirdly, by introducing a greater increase on park and ride charges from year 3 of the MTFP. from making changes to the special responsibility allowances, including removing the non-statutory deputy leader, removing the proposed investments in the flower beds at Friarswide Square, which was proposed since the consultation budget, and finally, as of a few minutes ago, by selling the FC1 number plate. While these changes would lead to a slightly greater draw of reserves in the first years of the MTFP, across the full 4 years, our proposals overall would lead to a net increase in reserves. We believe that these changes to the budget will play a small but significant role in tackling inequality and alleviating poverty. I hope members feel able to support them.
Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Lois Muddyman, thank you.
I formally second the Green Group amendment, but reserve my right to speak.
Okay. Are there any other speakers for this item? Can I request... Oh, Councillor Fairweather, and then Councillor Ajaz.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by saying that I make these comments in the spirit of constructive criticism, acknowledging that much of this amendment is in common with the Liberal Democrat one. I turn first to the suggested rises in park and ride charges. I think increasing the park and ride charges goes against my instincts, which are to reduce both the parking fee and the bus fares between the park and ride and the city. We're going to need the park and rides even more when more offices are built in the city and houses provided by our neighbouring district councils. In addition, any change will need to be agreed with the County Council to make sure all the Oxford park and rides are charging the same fees. We don't want people driving around the ring road to find a cheaper park and ride. The first hour charge would also go against the idea of parents using the park and ride to drop off their children, either to catch a bus into school or sometimes to walk their children to school, for example, as already happens for Sandhills Primary. Of course, another way of improving the income from the park and rides would be to cover the space in solar panels and sell the resultant energy created. The increase in city car parks may, as the head of financial services says, be counterproductive. In addition, raising the charges may have an unintended effect in that the traffic filters and the ZEZ will be introduced at the end of 2024 and probably the end of 2025. These will change the income from car parks even further. I hope to see far fewer cars in the city centre, of course. But for all these reasons, I cannot support the proposed amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Rahman, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I welcome the budget. Thank you for that, Chris and Barty. I'm just concerned really with actually both Lib Dems that's been accepted by the administration is that the number plate and the trophy, there are assets, and as time goes on, they increase in value. So I would just think carefully about selling assets that are increase in value while you still have more money available. That's kind of counterproductive. I wouldn't go along with something like that just on the basis because it's there and it's highlighted. It's an asset. I think over the last 10 years, the number plate has increased in value. While we have reserves, something that increases in value, we should hold on to that and use it when we really need it. I'll just make that comment. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hollingsworth, please.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Inspired by Councillor Fairweather, with whom I largely agree, I think, on most of what he said. I have to be careful in case there's something he said which I don't agree with and I've forgotten about. Largely agree with the sensible bits, anyway. My concern with the Green Group amendment is the reliance on the increase in car parks to car park charges to fund it, as it very now largely is funded. As Councillor Fairweather said, we're about to see very significant. They're not quite millennial changes, but they're the biggest changes for decades in how traffic works in this city. If they work, then they should significantly reduce the amount of traffic coming to the city centre. And those impacts are likely to be very difficult to predict financially. I've long been arguing we need to be weaning ourselves off car park income because, you know, frankly, it's like relying on the taxation on cigarettes to make your budget add up at a national level. You'd rather you didn't get any of it, frankly, because the purpose is a health thing. And similarly, we need to be looking at reducing the amount that we rely on in terms of car parking. And in percentage terms, we have done that in very large amounts, so we just need to be aware of that. I'm conscious that the county council's, what would be the word, swinging increases to car parking charges on Walton Street and Great Clarendon Street have effectively removed all of that revenue because there is now no car parking whatsoever in there. So they've refused to admit what the revenue estimates, the increases they thought they would get, but they're clearly not getting them because nobody is paying. And I think that is an issue as well. And as a final comment, and this is sort of a general one, which is why I endorse what's in Amendment 9A and not these very large sums for the sale of individual items, is that these are very stick-a-finger-in-the-air valuations. Number plates perhaps slightly easier to value than extremely unattractive 1920s silverware. But all of these things, they don't have a value until someone has paid it, as anyone who works selling things knows. You can put a price on, and a price is one thing, and a value is something potentially very, very different. And so I would be concerned about, the reliance of selling a single item in order to, one, pay for things, and two, pay for ongoing funding, which obviously it will not continue to support.
Councillor Susanna Pressel.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, there are various good reasons for opposing the Green Group budget, but one of them is that they're proposing to remove the money for the flower beds in Pride Square. Now, I want to talk about that a bit more during the discussion on the Labour Group budget, but I must just tell the members about why the flower beds look so awful, and they really do look absolutely dreadful in case you haven't seen them lately. The reason is because they were put in when Pride Square was beautifully improved by the County Council, and then the County Council dumped them on the City Council with no money to maintain them. So the City Council is refusing to spend any money on their maintenance, and they just look so awful. So I just thought that it would be wonderful to have a very small budget bit to replant them and then to maintain them. And if the Greens are going to take that out, shame on them.
Councillor Ed Mundy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So obviously we've had an individual circulated with my name, but actually I am voicing support for that Green amendment, despite reservations that are in print there now in terms of the garden waste collection. There's a few comments that have been made. I just wanted to kind of address that from my point of view. Councillor Raymond has talked about the value of the licence plate. I mean, it could just as well go down in value. You know, the licence plate, the personalised number plate, could become the kind of equivalent of a non-fungible token, and people will just realise it's completely worthless. It's just a piece of metal with some numbers and letters on it, isn't it? So, you know, we could be saying that this 165 grand is an absolute, but you know, brilliant thing for us that we might not otherwise have achieved. Now, actually, interesting that Councillor Press was talking about Pride Square. My thoughts on that were that really, you know, that's funding for those flower beds, if indeed they're important to us. You know, I feel that we should be looking for that funding from outside of the budget. We should be looking for that through ward budgets and private investment. That's exactly the kind of thing that we could be getting that kind of investment from, and from SIL as well. It's obviously already had a lot of money spent there on street level improvements. So I do welcome that that's no longer part of the budget in the proposal there. Yeah, with the garden waste, what I hadn't realised when I first tabled the individual amendment that's been printed, is that that's a freeze on the concessionary rate for the garden waste bins, which I do think is an important point to make. So they are people on benefits who are going to be effectively benefiting from that freeze on the charge for the bins, and I think that's an important point. So yeah, myself, I will certainly be supporting this amendment, so thank you for taking it.
Okay, Councillor Saj Malik, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. No, I won't be supporting the amendment because, joke aside, what I said about the number plate, I think that's a pride of the city. That's a recognition when the car comes in and what the number is the Lord Mayor of Oxford is going. And I think we should be proud of it. And we're not there. We're nowhere near the bankruptcy where we're starting to sell out all these stuff we have, which have obviously value. Secondly and thirdly, I don't agree the flower bed should have to come from the ward member. The ward member only get £2 a year or whatever, and there's other stuff. I think City Council needs to take further pride to have even more flowers around. When you travel around your twin cities or travel around other market towns, even the villages across, see how beautiful they're looking, money they're spending. Yeah. So we should be in the future looking to spend money from the council rather than asking the councillors to fund it. So I think we should all take pride representing our city and we should have more flowers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any more speakers before Councillor Smerton, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to say a word which I don't think we've heard so far in this debate, which is risk. I think that all the amendments before us today explore a spectrum of how much risk are you willing to tolerate. The budget that we had that went up for consultation was the lowest risk. It looked to make the largest cuts in the council's own services, essentially assuming the worst about the future. And they exist on a spectrum up to the Green Amendment that looks to take larger risks in being more optimistic about the future and possibly paying the price if that turns out not to be the case. I will be abstaining on the amendment on this occasion because it is a bit more risk than personally I feel comfortable taking. Our own amendment already took some savings from cabinet costs and some other savings as well. But I think increasing the level of risk to the degree proposed here, personally, I'm not comfortable to do it. So it's for that reason that I'll abstain on this proposed amendment.
Councillor Ross-Smith. That's cancelled. Okay, so can I request Councillor Turner to respond, please?
Thanks very much. I think it's easier to hear if I sit down. I wanted to respond to a few points in debate. I think many of the key issues I want to raise have come out. Firstly, on a couple of points of detail, on Ajaz's point, you'll note in the amendment which we've accepted, so my amendment, we talk about disposal of assets not on display. So I didn't have in mind a number plate there. I did have in mind the trophy. And I think that what we've done is rather than just taking the money and spending it, instead we're saying we'll reduce borrowing of it so it's sustainable. Of course, also if it didn't fetch the price that it might have done, then it would be less of an immediate challenge. It is a balance, but if I'm honest, I think looking at selling some things which no one sees, which aren't on display, at a time when potentially we're making some quite significant reductions in areas we really don't want to, I think that's all right. I think maybe the line moves in the other direction when we talk about something like the Lord Mayor's car, given Oxford's heritage. But of course, there'll be a range of views, and I think it would be quite sensible actually for a range of members to be involved in looking at all of this. Again, I don't watch Antiques Roadshow. I have a life, and it may be that these things don't fetch the amount of money that we expect, in which case you may need to go again, or maybe fetch more. We'll see. On Councillor Mundy's point, I would just point out that if we talk about using a SIL for this, that's still a council resource, essentially. It comes out of the same pot, so that's not really an alternative source of funding. And I do sympathise with what Councillor Pressel said, that if you happen to have an area of prominence in your ward, it doesn't mean you can always be expected to fund everything. This is a major gateway to the city. The main point in all of this, and the reason why I think, I will be voting against the amendment, is just around the degree of risk. What this proposes to do is we're already increasing car park charges next year. It then jacks them up further before we've seen the impact of new public transport changes that are happening, Kennington Bridge works, what have you, ongoing Rotley Road situation, all of that, but then also the impact of the changes that we haven't even brought in yet, and then we're banking the money there. Now if that goes really, really well, and the money keeps flowing in, totally up to looking at that next year, and I said that in my speech, sort of moving it, and clearly I would rather that visiting motorists paid money than that we ended up losing services in our communities. However, I really wouldn't feel comfortable accepting that at this stage, and I think the Head of Finance's points sort of reflect that. That would be it'd be a risky move, and of course with all of this, if we end up taking money in budgets in future years, which we don't get in, it then ends up moving us towards a kind of slash and burn model, rather than a model where we can plan things much more carefully. So that's why I unfortunately can't support this amendment, much as I understand the sentiment behind it.
Thank you. Councillor Merriman, would you like to speak as the seconder or the proposal?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I begin with another thank you to officers and councillors for the time spent preparing and scrutinising the budget. We appreciate it's a difficult task in this current climate. And thank you too to everyone who's engaged in the debate. We are of course relieved and grateful that the administration has amended their draft budget to stop the reduction in the council tax reduction scheme in line with opposition group proposals. Thank you. The rationale behind this reduction and all the other measures in the Green Group's amendment is our strong desire to offer as much support as possible and protection to the residents of our city who are struggling the most during this crisis of inequality. We're all aware that Oxford remains one of the most unequal cities in the country, based on income, deprivation and social mobility measures. As councillors, our job is to protect those who are struggling the most. And to do this, we must also protect the many voluntary groups and community organisations who work so hard to protect those on the lowest incomes. Which is why, as well as retaining the council tax reduction scheme, we should also continue to fund our work in communities and protect the voluntary sector grants budget. Voluntary and community groups, such as Community Larders, for example, do an enormous amount to support those on the lowest incomes. We must protect these budgets so that they continue to do so at a time when their support is needed more than ever. And finally, a personal note on why I think we should be selling council assets such as the Morel hunting trophy and the personal number plate to help fund some of these amendments. When my family came to England in the early 70s as political migrants, we had very little, and 6 of us lived in a tiny 2 up, 2 down. And my father had to sell one of our only valuable possession, a piece of furniture made by his father, so that we had enough to eat and heat our small home that winter. It broke his heart. But when you're struggling to feed your family and keep them warm, holding on to heirlooms makes no sense at all. And holding on to the Lord Mayor's personal number plate and the trophy, whilst the residents of our city struggle to feed their families and heat their homes, makes no sense at all. And we should be looking to see what else we have gathering dust. I urge you to support our amendment. Thank you.
Right, I will request Councillor Jarvis, would you like to summarise?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to those who contributed to the discussion. I'll respond to a few of the points that have been raised. So, one of the points raised by Councillor Fairweather was that we would need to align any park and ride increases with the county. I very much agree. That's why we're not proposing any increase in park and ride charges on top of the administration budget until the 3rd year of the NTFP to give a long lead in time to have those conversations. Other comments were made throughout the debate on car parking charges and the income from them. I do think that, I accept that they're, in modelling these things, it can be challenging, and I'm sure, as the administration has illustrated in their comments this evening, they also accept that. I would highlight, though, that the administration's budget also hinges on increasing car parking charges just by a lesser amount. And the figures that we've got in this amendment are exceptionally conservative. They have a strong resistance factor put on them. For example, the 1 hour free park and ride charge has a 50% resistance factor built into that, and there is also resistance factors on the other figures. I mean, I didn't realise that flower beds were going to be the most controversial point of the evening. just to make it clear, I'm absolutely not opposed to flower beds. I think they're fundamentally a good thing. Just in the grand scheme of the current budget and the proposals that are before us, I would rather spend that money on some of the items that we've got in our amendment. I'll happily take that shame for proposing that. The Councillor Mallett's comments about the number plate, I mean, I think Councillor Muddyman explained very well my views on that as well, but I would just say there are many things in this city that I take pride in. I must say I've never taken any pride in a number plate, but we are where we are. The final thing I'd just like to say is to the 8 people to my right, you are the single most important people in the room at this moment. And what I would say is that in previous budget rounds, you have supported introducing a hardship relief fund. It was part of your amendment at the last Budget Council. You supported other elements of our budget amendments in the past, including those that are before you today. So what I would do is encourage you to take some courage and to vote with us this evening so that we can amend the budget and make it to introduce some of these measures which will help address inequality and alleviate poverty in our city.
I will put the decision to the vote. Please can I request that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise, so committee services can ensure the vote is counted. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? That was like the Mexican wave. Okay, thank you. The recommendations have been rejected. We now move to the independent group amendment. Can I remind members we have 33 minutes for this item. Any time saved can be used at the end of the debate. I will now request Councillor Ejaz Rahman to introduce the independent group budget amendments.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I won't take all that time up. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody, Ed and his team, James and his team, especially the officers, for all the hard work they do. I know it's difficult. But following on from that, I mean, our budget amendment works around that we've had 14 years of a disastrous government for this country, especially for local government, and all the cuts that everybody's relayed in the speeches so far. And there's a certain detachment between the authority and local residents, so our main aim is to get everybody back together. Hopefully there will be a new government soon, and maybe some of these won't be needed. The main change that we've made is that we found that the bulky waste item is like a stealth tax, and it upsets so many people on the doorstep that we've experienced, and we put it together. People are disheartened by it. I spoke to officers, and we've only proposed it for a year. So I'd just like to remind members that we've had a 75% increase in fly tipping in that time. That's 1,500 tonnes of extra items that people have had to take away. So we've put it in there for a year to see what happens. Commercially, taking large items up to a minimum of 16 to 18 tonnes costs around about £50 a tonne. So on that basis, and these items that are large, they're individual items. There might be a sofa here, there might be something there. To balance that, what we've done is we've cut the parts maintenance instead of every 4 weeks to have it every 6 weeks. Speaking to officers and looking at other staff, lots of the parts is where the fly tipping takes place, so actually it should help, the two should correlate with each other and help. And then also we've looked at less utilised toilets. They do sometimes attract antisocial behaviour. It's not something that we would like to do. I know they're quite a valuable service to some people, sometimes homeless people, but these are underutilised toilets. They're not toilets that are used all the time, and they're on that basis. And it's for a year. We've added 440 back into Nigel's budget, so he should be happy with that. And we based that on if the bulky waste item is not proved with additional fly tipping, we have that additional money that maybe we can look at again. And that's the only changes that we made. I will follow on from what Chris said, and it's disappointing that some people were here ready for leadership, but unfortunately they've taken a back seat. So I would ask you to have a look at that, and the main purpose of our budget is actually to bring us, representatives of the city, back with the people, so they feel that we can do a little for them. And we've done the same thing with the council tax. It's only small, I know it's £24, but it just shows that the public that we do what we can for them at a time when it's really difficult. You know, we build all these council houses for them, which is great, and we really have, but there is a detachment, and we should give responsibility to the wider public and trust them with their money instead of deciding where they should spend their money. So let's try to keep it as minimal as possible, and that's what we've tried to do. So we hope that you can support our amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder? Councillor Shaista Aziz. Are there any other speakers, or do you? You may have the right to reserve to speak at the end. Is that what you want to do?
Would you like to say a few words now?
Okay.
Great, thank you. So yeah, I'd just like to echo my colleague Councillor Giles Rahman's comments, to thank officers for all their assistance in us being able to present these amendments in the way we have. Also like to thank Ed Turner, Councillor Ed Turner, and all the officers involved in putting this budget together as well. The only thing I really want to say here is that the savings that we are suggesting are small. We understand that. We understand that there's a lot of very serious challenges that the council is facing in this economic and political climate. But we also want to say that what some people may consider to be a small saving is actually a really important saving for those people who are really struggling, particularly with the cost of living crisis. We know that this is one of the most unaffordable places in the whole country to live, and there is a real disconnect between so many different parts of our city in relation to disposable income, in relation to life expectancy, and many, many other issues. So we understand that this is a really challenging time, but this is why we have tried our best to put forward a constructive budget where we are working in a way that is responsible, which is what we should be doing. And I think this is an opportunity for everyone here to try and make some changes to this budget in a way that will allow the budget to be balanced, and it will be a responsible budget, but also make you know, some positive changes, additional positive changes to people's lives during this troubling and difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers for this item? Councillor Chris Martin.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We will oppose the proposed amendment because it makes two key recommendations that I strongly oppose. The measure proposes to knock a point off council tax. This is a much worse way to put money in people's pockets than the council tax reduction scheme that has already been addressed and successfully amended earlier this evening. CTR levers over £6 for every £6 in benefit for every £1 that this council spends. Council tax is 1-to-1. CTR selectively targets the households earning the least, each according to their means, while council tax cuts will pile hundreds of thousands back to the already wealthy. If we absolutely must, CTR can be varied in future years. Council tax is limited by legislation to a small rise each year, currently well below inflation. That means that it would be a financial millstone that would stick with the council for years, perhaps for decades, perhaps for as long as there is a city named Oxford. I think this is irresponsible financial management, and it bears consideration that both the proposer and the seconder were part of the Labour cabinet until just a few months ago. The measure also proposes to close public toilets, a deficit that will be felt most painfully by disabled people, older people, and anyone else that would find it more difficult to readily access an alternative. On top of that, the proposed cut is vaguely specified. We are told that 16 toilets are to be closed, but not which ones. There are two good ideas in here. Cabinet expenses, which have been addressed already, and there may be something in the fly tipping figures, although I note the caveats in the officer's remark, and in particular we would need to look at what is the extra cost of the extra collection of the fly tipping, and that is not done in these budget remarks. Finally, a noted query, and I haven't written anything about this because I was surprised by it landing on the table just recently, is I spoke earlier about risk, and this budget actually exists off the bottom of that spectrum. This budget sucks £400,000 into reserves relative to the administration budget. Therefore, the implication is that the proposers think that the administration is being unduly profligate and needs to be more conservative with its finances. That's quite surprising, coming from former Labour councillors, but it seems to be the implication. In particular, I note that in introducing the motion, we are told that we don't want to close the public toilets. That comes to just over 320k. The surplus is 400k, so you could not do it. It proposes to cut parks and street cleaning by just under 320k, but the surplus is 400k, so you could just not do it. Either one of those two things, at least one of those two things, is being done purely voluntarily, out of desire to set a more conservative budget. So let's hear which one and why you think that we should be doing that. Overall, I think most fundamentally this is the wrong approach on tax. I think that's the most important issue here, so I will be opposing the amendment today.
Councillor Chris Jarvis, please.
Thank you, Norma. Before I start, I just have a query for officers, really, which is that we've obviously had the Labour amendment to their own budget, which has some interrelation to the numbers that are in this amendment, and I want some clarity on what the figures we're actually looking at are, if possible, because there are several figures, and also the community services as well. It's not just a special responsibility, it's also the community's budget line. Would it be possible to get any clarification on that from officers before I speak? If not, I'll speak without that clarification.
Officers, would you like to intervene?
Yeah, not sure what you want clarifying, Chris, actually, but...
So there are two budget lines in this amendment that have interrelation with which was proposed for the initial administration budget, which interrelates with what has changed since Labour amendment to their own budget, i.e. The final line, the reinstatement of savings and community services, and the third but final line, the special responsibility allowances. So basically the reserves figures and other things have changed.
Well, the reinstatement in community services is just is putting the savings back in that the initial Labour budget was taken out, basically. So that's the relationship on that one.
But okay, in which case I'm happy to speak to it anyway. But I think yeah.
Can I? Sorry, very sorry, Chris.
No, at the moment. If you can just let him finish, please.
Can I raise it as a point of order? I think that's genuinely not the right answer. If I may briefly. Because the Labour amendment itself reinvested 110 per year of the 150 that's described here, it is possible to, of course, to cut another 150 on top of the 110, and we may reasonably take it that that's what this is doing, but there definitely is an interaction with the 110 that was in the Labour Amendment A. And with regards to the Cabinet members item, the 3 16s in year 25, 26 and 27, you can't cut the Cabinet from 10 to 8 twice, so those surely must come out of it. I'm not, there's good reasons why I'm not in Nigel's chair, but were I he, I would suggest that the 150 can stand alone, because it is possible to reduce on top of a reduction, but it isn't possible to reduce the Cabinet to 8 twice, so those 3 16s ought to go away.
It also feels like it's right to me.
Yeah, I think could I just ask for a short adjournment, perhaps 5 minutes, just to have a look at the figures and
Yeah. Members, this meeting is now adjourned. Please can members make sure their mobile phones are on silent. If it goes off, we'll be requesting some money, donations to the Lord Mayor's charities. And Councillor Aziz is now back, and we will now shortly start. Thank you. Nigel Kennedy, would you like to commence?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. So the two proposals that we were talking about, one is around the community services savings. So the independent group are looking to accept the Labour amendment of the £110,000. So remove the £150,000 within their budget basically and accept the 110. And then in relation to the special responsibility allowances, to delete the saving of the £16,000 per year within their budget, as it's already been taken by the Labour group. That will actually change the figures from the transfer to reserves of 439,000, which was previously the case, to 255,000. So from a financial viewpoint, it stacks up basically. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to go to Councillor Chris Jarvis, as where we left off.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and yeah, sorry for triggering that adjournment. So I think just to start on this, I feel like I should say that I think I support the broad thrust of what the amendment is aiming at, and council tax is broadly a regressive tax, and so seeking to reduce that is helpful. What concerns me about that is that it is one of the few levers that local government has to raise revenue, and it has a knock-on effect in the current context where we have the referendum limit. Any year that you don't increase it at the maximum level, it has knock-on effects on future years on the level that you can raise it then, because you're raising it as a percentage of your previous base. And so I would be concerned about putting us in a position later down the line where, presuming that we're not going to get rid of that referendum limit anytime soon, that the council tax, the amount of revenue that the council can raise in future years, which may well be more challenging than ones that we're currently facing, is diminished. The second caveat, the second concern I have about this is similar to comments that Councillor Smoten made, which is around public toilets. I think public toilets are incredibly important, and one of the things when I first moved to Oxford, I was struck by how limited the amount of public toilets we have are, and I think that, yes, some public toilets are going to be less used than others, but they're still being used, and they are still really, really useful for everybody, but most crucially, as has been acknowledged elsewhere, people who are homeless and so on. So, with regards to that, I think, in fairness to the independent group, one of the things they've acknowledged is that, there are, in these instances, other premises nearby where people could access toilets. I think that is, in a worst case scenario, the sort of thing that councils could theoretically look at, only if they have agreement with businesses and so on that the public can use those. So without that agreement in place, as we've seen in some councils who've been forced to do that, I don't think that we can support closing public toilets. So despite me agreeing with the thrust of this, and I want to see more people in people's pockets, and what we're looking at here is in some ways similar to what our group proposed, I don't feel I can support it on those two grounds.
Councillor Nigel Chapman, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'd like to comment specifically on the bulky waste issue, which obviously falls within my portfolio. Obviously, in a perfect world, we'd all like to have a system where bulky waste disposal is free, but it hasn't been for a number of years now. And why? Because we need to reflect the increased cost of providing those services, and particularly the cost of collection. And if we were to freeze or eliminate these charges, as the amendment is proposing, it would effectively be reducing revenue for the council, so damaging our ability to protect services everyone uses, and obviously that revenue helps us balance our books. And in the end, bulky waste as a service is a discretionary service. The residents can decide to use or not. It doesn't seem right to me to undermine services universally or very widely used to reduce the cost of it. So in this amendment we've got, a situation where they also want to reduce toilets, we want to reduce park cleaning and so on. I mean, we need to keep those going, and we pay for some of that in reality by raising the charges that we do on bulky waste. Secondly, I want to say that your interpretation of data is, I think the officer described it as not convinced that a link exists with increases in fly tipping instances probably coming from increased recording. That's very kind of Nigel. I mean, your interpretation of data is incredibly tendentious. I mean, even the figures you have put in front of us do not demonstrate a 75% increase in antisocial behaviour of this kind. They demonstrate a small increase year on year, and then a bit more increase this year, but nothing like 75%. The next thing I'd say that when the fly tipping charges were introduced, ODS and the Council did not collect fly tipping data in the years before they came into effect. So there's no way you can calculate a 75 increase on what was the situation before fly tipping charges came in and the current situation. And the other nuances of the story, and I'm sorry I'm a bit of a nerd about this, but I really care about this, getting this right, and not just flying figures around like 75% when there's no basis for them. That much of the fly tipping in your columns and your figures, which you've asked for, is domestic waste in plastic bags, not bulky waste items, so it's not affected by the charges at all. And finally, a high proportion of bulky waste, which is offensive and antisocial and terrible, I accept all those arguments, is actually tipping of multiple items by people in back streets and quiet places. And do you think if we stopped charging for bulky waste items in the household area, that these people would suddenly stop doing this? Well, hell, they carry on doing it just as they are now. So for all those reasons, it is at best simplistic, at worst fallacious, to suggest these ideas based on that statistical analysis. And therefore, for that basis alone, I would be not supporting it, and I hope everybody else follows our lead. Thank you.
Can we have Councillor Alex Hollingsworth, please?
Excuse me. No, that's the rubbish. Use the good one. I'll be brief because many of the things have been said already, but one hasn't. I would, though, want to reiterate and echo the points that Councillor Chris's Spokesman Jarvis have made about the council tax. It's a false step, and we can see the difficulties that our colleagues and comrades on Oxfordshire County Council have had to battle with, because for many years low council tax was the watchword there, and that's caused all sorts of inherited problems for that council and other councils up and down the country where they took over from administrations that took that approach. The item I wanted to flag as being of some concern is the one about reducing street cleaning. If you look at the public consultation, except it's not an enormous percentage by any means of the population, but it was something that came back as a service highly valued and one where cuts should not be made. I think all of us who I'm sure everyone does, spends a lot of time, in our communities, talking to our neighbours, talking to residents. Street cleaning is right up at the top of things which people prioritise in terms of the services that this council delivers. Any reductions to that are things I would be concerned about. Additional reductions like this, I think, go too far. So for all the reasons others have said, but also for that one, I think I would urge people to vote against this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Sergeant Malik.
Thank you very much. Now, I need to pick up a point there about bulky items. I think when Nigel Chapman speaks, I think he speaks with kind of very either bullish way or very, however, I want to put it politely. But the problem is I think he needs to get out and look around the city. When you're at cabinet places, it all depends how many times you leave your cozy living room and go and look at your city. As a taxi driver, when I drive, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to basically put on a social media, tag him in, and take all these where the people are dumping around the space. If each of the councillors walk around their wards, you will see item dumps I see day by day, and I report to the ODS. because they've been dumped there because the only reason because the people cannot afford to pay. And they said that when they were bringing the nearly £100,000 or something, so it'll be very interesting to know how many revenue they've been basically collecting since, have they met their target of that one thing. But when the bulky item, the streets are eyesore if you go around, even go in a leafy Barton. I mean, I'm sure where Mr. Chapman lives in summertime is very nice and people don't dump the stuff there. But come around in a deprived and poor state where people are struggling for end meets, and when you see they can't afford, and then whoever is, they go and dumping the stuff. So you should have your numbers there. But coming here is like the same thing when I talk about the customer service office. Oh, satisfaction rate is 96%, we're doing great. Yeah, exactly. But the people who cannot get there, elderly, the frail, who cannot go online, they cannot do things, we deprive them the services on that level. Council has a statutory duty to do these things. And if you take pride in your city and pride to represent your vote, have a walk around. Go and look around the state and you will see if there are bulky item dumps or not. Thank you.
Councillor Anna Railton.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Yes, so I was just going to sort of slightly echo the point that Councillor Hinesworth made. So, in addition to the budget consultation, which did very much raise these points about street cleaning and maintenance in our parks, the resident survey also says exactly the same thing. I'm a very big fan of the resident survey, but it was basically like one of the #1 things that people really valued about this council doing is very much its maintenance of parks and street cleaning. I'd also just like to say, yes, I've done a little 180 on toilets, public toilets. There is a public toilet near where I live, and I was very, last year in the budget, sort of this budget round, I was very sceptical. I was like, oh no, we should totally close that, blah, 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 blah. But actually it turns out that it's used quite a lot by delivery drivers, turns out. These are people who are, very much surviving on, in the gig economy, and yeah, these are people's voices that we don't really hear. So yeah, as well as, sort of the access reasons, there are people like that who also use them as well. So yes, very much, I think basically yes, a lot of these things in this budget amendment goes against, yes, including the actual sort of, I think it wasn't quite a 52-48, which would have been quite a triggering percentage, but it was 52% in support of raising council tax to support services, and one of these services is doing things like street cleaning and maintenance in our parks. So yes, for those reasons, I will be opposing this amendment.
Councillor Ed Mundy.
Thank you for your amendment, and I do welcome the thrust of it, and certainly it's good to see some thinking outside the box on the collection of bulky items, which I think it's fair to say that we would expect to see a less sort of clandestine disposal of bulky waste and so on, which might not even just be your sort of typical fly tipping, but also people inappropriately putting them in our own waste bins at the back of the flats. But I don't want to go too much into the toilets. It's been talked about a lot already. It's a big enough concern that I wouldn't be able to support this amendment for sure. And actually, I take note as well of the comments on council tax that have been made already. I'm a postal worker. We have to use the public toilet sometimes, and when you talk about antisocial behaviour, I think it's not quite right really to be sort of using public toilets as an excuse for suggesting that they result in antisocial behaviour, because I really don't think that gets to the root cause of what people call antisocial behaviour or what people perceive to be antisocial behaviour. And when I've discussed with you about which toilets would be closed, you did raise the toilets on Mansell Way, which I would have thought they were quite well used, and certainly they are in a very prominent place and a place that gets a lot of through traffic. And obviously, as you've said in your amendment, there would be an expectation that people would use alternative facilities, but those facilities are likely to be privately owned or for the use specifically of patients at health centres and so on, and simply not appropriate to be suggesting that people have a right to use those facilities when in fact they don't. But thanks for tabling that amendment.
Can I request Councillor Turner to respond?
Always take requests from you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, cheers. I think it's three things because it's been a good debate. One, actually, if I may just reflect on a couple of things Councillor Malik mentioned. One was just, I think what Councillor Chapman was driving at was just unfortunately some flighting things done by people who sadly just don't care. It's not about the money, and it really frustrates me. You know, we do a load of community litter picks in Rose Hill, and it's the good and the kind people that go out. You know, not all by any means on high incomes. And then sadly, you know, you go around a few days later and it's just idiots that chuck stuff around. And I don't, you know, there might be cases where people do some hardship and some idiots, they just don't care. And I think that was what Nigel Chapman was driving at. But, you know, good for you for reporting stuff. I think, you know, just as an aside as well, it's a brilliant idea and I just wanted to flag it. Mentioned satisfaction, otherwise with the contact with customer services. I understand we're now going to be having some customer services officers go out into food larders. Which is just such a terrific idea. You know, I think that will really reach people. I think it's really, really good. But sorry, that doesn't talk to the amendment that was being raised. So I will now do the amendment. I mean, on the toilets, understood. And look, this was one of officers' proposed stuff, and it's right they do, and they propose something they don't support. And you know, as administration, this was one of the things which we turned down. I'm looking at the list of toilets that would close, and it includes Littlemore, also includes Abingdon Road, so there would be no toilet facilities at Hinksey Park. Which is a worry, frankly, given the playground there. There's a German word called, well, I'll translate half it, it's called wild weeing, and that would be, I fear, the upshot. Florence Park, similarly, is on the list as well, and then the cemeteries, where again, you know, often older people perhaps would be going to visit a cemetery, and then that could be quite difficult, so don't support that. And on the council tax, and look, I've always been totally consistent about this, and I've had my disagreements with Labour people on this. There have been Labour councils who've said we're going to be really smart, we'll reduce the council tax increase and we'll get sort of brownie points for it. The Dems campaigned for it in Oxford actually in the late 2000s and lost. I've got to be honest, I was a bit taken aback that it was the main point of the Labour Party local government election campaign launch a year ago, where they said we're going to freeze council tax and hadn't perhaps quite noticed it was an ongoing cost, not a one-off cost, and I provided some good feedback to Labour politicians I knew on that point as well. The problem is it's ongoing, it's an ongoing thing, and it's an ongoing thing at a time we really face some big risks that I tried to address in my speech. And for a saving of, I think it's a bit less than 7 pence per household per week, of course not now being paid by those on the lowest incomes, I just don't think it's worth it. So that's why I can't support the amendment.
Okay, I will put the decision, before I do that, Councillor Rahman, would you like to summarise?
Thank you. I'll start with Ed's and Nigel response to some of the stuff that they said. It is a difficult budget. We'll try to make something that was different from everybody else. The main opposition has sort of kind of blurred the line between yourselves and themselves. So we put that out there. As you said, there's many Labour councils that have frozen the budget. We absolutely understand that it's a compound issue and we've balanced the budget over 4 years. So it's going for 4 years. That money, we've accounted for that money over the years. The bulky waste item, it's a moot point. It's there for a year to see what the figures would come. Seeing as that Nigel said you love the figures, if this amendment was passed, I'm sure you would drive them to find those figures and see if there was a correlation. So we would have tried that, and I think the main thrust of our amendment was really is that give something back to the communities that we do serve, and try to feel that we're on their side. These are the kind of things that alienate them once they pay their council tax. I know it's not a statutory duty to collect bulky waste items, but most people think it is. And when somebody puts a bed outside their house and it's over there one day and then it's somewhere else the next day, and then you've got to send ODS out to pick it up, and that's a cost as well. So that is important. The thrust of that was do it for a year, see what the costs are, and then reevaluate over the period of the 4 years that we have this budget for. We can always amend the budget accordingly every year we do that. Going back, I know that the toilets were going to be an issue. It was a difficult decision, but that's the one we felt we should take on that. Street cleaning, it's still at 4 weeks, it was only going up to 6 weeks. And with the fly tipping, what we envisage going down, we'd expect that would be a little bit less. So we think, like I said earlier on, those two things would correlate. But I we take that point of view, but we still think that you should hopefully support it. Going back to leader of the opposition, fascination with Labour, yeah, we were on the Labour benches, we were in the cabinet. I mean, the way that you speak, sometimes it feels like you want to be over there. I don't know if it takes you, but maybe you can ask. Totally ignoring your Oxford article in October when you said you was ready for leadership. Well, apparently you're not. You just want to be what you are. So I thank everybody. Thanks for the debate, and good luck with the application. Put it forward.
I will now put the decision to the vote. Yes, you can clap if you wish to. I will put the decision to the vote. Please can I request that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise so that committee services can ensure the vote is counted. Those in favour? Okay. And those against? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. The recommendations have been rejected. We will now have a break for 30 minutes. If there are any further amendments, can these be submitted? I take it you don't want the break. So shall we? We need it for the individual amendments. So go and have a ponder. Okay, we need to just propose. If you just give me a moment, please, before anyone leaves the room. Emma, do you want to announce it?
So if members would be minded, I've suggested to Lord Mayor that if you don't want a 30-minute adjournment, you could take a proposal and second to suspend standing orders, perhaps have a shorter adjournment of maybe 10 or 15 minutes, just in case anybody's got anything, and take a vote on that, and if that's passed, then we can shorten the...
Who's the proposer, please? Saif Malik proposes, and who seconds? Alex Hollingsworth. 15 minutes on the clock. 15 minutes, please. Okay, members, please take a seat. Most people are back, so can I remind members we have 40 minutes in total for this item. Any time saved can be used at the end of the debate. The first individual amendment is from Councillor Chris Moulton. The next, you have to clarify.
Yeah, I didn't know whether he wanted me to speak, yes or not. This is still concerning the council tax reduction matter, which was still taken care of earlier in the meeting. Therefore, I withdraw this amendment.
Thank you. The next individual amendment is from Councillor Catherine Miles. Can you kindly introduce the amendment?
Yes, just to say that this is to replace the funds that Lord Linwood had to replace it with some work on Vision Zero, on an action plan and commitment for the city in areas that fall under the responsibility of the City Council that relate to delivering safety improvements that can contribute to the wider Vision Zero for the county. I have something to say on this, but I understand that the preference is for me to speak after. Is that correct? Yeah.
Can we have a seconder? Councillor Ross Smith, would you like to reserve the right to reply? Or? Okay, thank you. Are there any other speakers for this item? Councillor Alex Hollingsworth.
I'm very clear that I'm extremely supportive of Vision Zero. So I have absolutely no concern whatever with the principle of this. But the issue is that the things that have been talked about, like safer streets, school streets and so on, are all things which the county council is responsible for and frankly is already doing. We've already, we have in recent times had to reduce our expenditure on items which are the responsibility of other councils, and in the past we've picked up issues which are the responsibility of other councils, like children's services. I'm kind of concerned that we don't kind of continue to do that sort of thing. I mean, some of the suggestions in it, I'm not entirely clear what using the, using the planning function in order to create safe streets. The planning function can't do anything on streets. The planning function can make decisions about planning applications. It can't redesign a street. That's not what planning does. It's not how it works. I'm very happy to kind of discuss that in greater detail here, but I mean that isn't what the planning function is for, and the planning function couldn't make such a contribution, though I'm sure all the planning officers would thoroughly agree with the proposal here, unless a planning application came forward for a new street, and it would do that as a matter of course by consulting with the county council and using its expertise in this matter to ensure that the thing was done anyway. So it would be replication of what's already there. So on that basis, I would be opposing this. Nothing at all, as I said, against the principle of Vision Zero, which is an absolutely vital thing for the city. But because I'm not sure what it would actually achieve, which isn't already going to be achieved by the county council. So it would be spending money to achieve nothing, and indeed something which the county council is responsible for and is already doing.
Councillor Susan Brown, please.
Thank you. Well, I think I won't talk about the Vision Zero aspect of this because I think that's been very well covered by Councillor Hollingsworth. Although I will just say that I too am completely committed to Vision Zero, but I am absolutely not committed to us spending money unnecessarily, which is for the responsibilities of other councils, which is what is being proposed here. What I do want to talk about is the proposal that is being deleted here, which is the pathway replacement through the city's only woods. These are the only woods actually in our city, and they happen to be in my ward, and I'm very clear about that. And we're very proud of them locally. At the moment, we have got quite a severe problem with the pathway because it is the main access for many streets in the ward to the local shops. It's through the woods. And there are quite a lot of people with disabilities in the area. There's also quite a lot of people with pushchairs and small children, and the pathway is not safe currently. We've been trying for some time to get the funding together to try and make sure that we can replace the path, quite honestly, I can't understand why anyone would be wanting to take away the improved safety from a deprived community to give them access to their shops easily and safely in order to spend money which is not the responsibility of this council, whereas actually replacing this pathway is.
Councillor Mark Lydon.
I shan't repeat what's been said, but let's hope history doesn't repeat itself. And if we don't accept the budget for Magdalen Woods, we'd have to look at closing the woods as the footpath isn't fit for purpose. Now, let me give you a little history. Open Moorland is known as Magdalen Woods, and the main western section is reached via Atkins Road and Wood Farm, also used by other footpaths and is managed and owned by Oxford City Council. On the 22nd of May, 1705, a group of more than 20 residents from Church Cowley, Temple Cowley and Hotwall Street armed themselves with axes and shovels and set about tearing down the fences around Magdalen Open Woods. This suggests attempts were already being made to take away the rights of local people. In 1862, bear with me. So Richard Pether, the maternal grandfather of Lord Nuffield, took on the lease of Wood Farm together with Open Magdalen Woods and Magdalen College. From Magdalen College. In 1862, Pether fenced off Open Magdalen and began cultivating it in 1869. The poor, not my words, I would say, the residents of Headington ignored this, and so the fight of the opening Magdalen continued for about 30 years, taking the form of mass trespass, large-scale raids and illegal grazing from cows. What I'm saying is, if you get the gist of this as well, that the residents of Wood Farm would be up in arms if we do have to close this. So please keep the bid in for Magdalen Woods Path, please. Thank you.
Councillor Emily Kerr.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I accept that we do not, as a council, have responsibility for all areas of Vision Zero, and yes, that the county is working on this. It is worth noting that ODS has around 500 vehicles, which, from what I can find from their policy from April 22, does not include direct vision standards, which you wouldn't necessarily expect it to, but whilst some vehicles are not able to have direct vision standards, there are alternatives such as Fresnel lenses, other ways we can significantly reduce pedestrian and cyclist danger. As I'm sure you all know, 50% of cyclist fatalities and a fifth of pedestrian fatalities are due to heavy goods vehicles. So I think, bearing in mind we have a lot of heavy goods vehicles, we don't seem to have a direct vision standard that we are using in our own council, unless it's in a policy that I can't find. I would support the idea. It's just, okay, if you can correct me on this, that's great, but just, I can't find it. So I would support us doing what we can, and therefore I would support this motion.
Councillor Chris Jarvis, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm rarely surprised here, but I am surprised to hear Labour frontbenchers seemingly endorsing armed insurrection and non-violent direct action, as we had from Councillor Ligo there. But every day is a school day. It was also very interesting to hear Councillor Ligo refer to the issues in this area aging back to 1705, I think was the first date we had. All I would do is question, given the incredibly passionate defences of this spending that we've had, if it is so important and we've known about this issue for so very, very long, why was this not in the Council's consultation budget and was later slipped in through what appears to be a series of ward-level bongs?
Councillor Ajaz Rahman.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. From what Chris said, that was my point I was going to make, although I agree with Councillor Hollingsworth on the points that he raised, so to keep it short. Although it is a bit of a worry when it came in, and also I support the Vision Zero analysis and that as well, but it is dangerous to go into territory. We're already cutting glass twice for county council, so that's why I'm opposed to this amendment.
Councillor Mike Rowley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just briefly, while I do appreciate that nature has a value on its own, nature within our city is better when people have access to it. Especially people in areas of deprivation. We don't want to be exclusive with such natural assets as we have. Only the keeper sees where the ringdove broods and the badgers roll at ease. There was once a road through the woods. We don't obviously... this isn't a proposal for building a road. It is a proposal which will get more people taking exercise and interacting with nature, and in itself that should encourage conservation awareness, awareness of green issues, and hopefully also carbon reduction, as more people will walk rather than taking unnecessary short car journeys to their local shops. So I commend what Susan and Mark have said.
Councillor Saad Malik.
Thank you. I think this is a motion in the wrong council actually. There was a budget yesterday at the county council. So that should have been given there, and due respect to Councillor Miles, her party is in charge of the county and running and all this. and they should be not coming here asking anything for the county. They should be getting on equally, you know. So they are in power. I mean, somebody need to tell them, you are the guys who are running the county council. Trust me, you are running it.
Councillor.
No, I'm not finished yet. I'm just reminding them, they probably don't believe they're running the county council. And we shouldn't be bringing this. I mean, I am all up for the services, but I have my long-stand understanding we should not take any responsibility. I think this council has done in the past many things which we have taken on where county council, no matter who was running, and let down. And this city council has picked up the tabs and tried to help there because we care. But equally, it is the responsibility of the county council. So let's not muddle the system. So we are a two-tier system. Let the county do their work, and if they don't do it, we'll criticize them or get rid of them in 2025.
Councillor Anna Robertson.
Hi, yes, I was just going to respond to Councillor Kerr's point about the sort of like ODS fleet. So I mean, I looked into this when I brought forward the clocks, construction logistic, community safety stuff, planning. I also looked at what the state of ODS's fleet was in this area as well, and I think it's not in the Falls programme. It's in something else. I can't remember what it's called. But basically, the upgrading of all of the vision things, the vision standards with certainly the large HGVs that we have, is being done through the electrification programme as well. So I think there's also just vast amounts of fleet telemetry that's already done on it. And I was reasonably convinced that it was already on a good pathway with respect to that actually. And certainly it would need large capital expenditure to accelerate that. The 16k I think it is. Wouldn't touch the sides quite frankly. And yeah, I mean, you know my sort of commitment to Vision Zero and its the various facets of it, but I genuinely actually don't see what value this would add beyond the scheme that the county is currently leading on and leading on very well. So, thank you.
Councillor Smoten.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll be brief. Let's put to bed this question of which council is doing what. The proposal that is in front of us is very, very specifically about identifying those aspects of Vision Zero which are not in the county council's remit, and therefore which falls to either districts or parishes to pick up. If it is in the county's remit, it would be done by the county. And I know this because I have the relevant cabinet member about 3 metres away from me and will bend his ear as required in order to ensure that there is no shirking of responsibilities from the county to the district. Rather, those responsibilities which do not fall under the county's remit, they do fall to the districts.
Councillor Ed Turner, would you like to respond?
No thanks.
Councillor Miles, would you like to summarise? Oh, Liz would like the right to reply. Yes, please.
Sorry,
Ross.
Thank you. I'd like to speak, Lord Mayor. Thank you. Thank you for those that have made comments, and thank you to Councillor Smoten for clearing that point up with regard to who is responsible for what. There are things that the city could do that are within its remit when it comes to planning. I'm thinking particularly of car-free development. I'm thinking of design guidance when it comes to car spaces and sizes and so forth, that we can have some influence on and can have some input under that would support Vision Zero as well too. Thank you for the history lesson from Councillor Mark Rygo. It's always good to hear locally about Milton Woods, and I understand Oxford Preservation Trust is actually going to be doing some walking work actually within the woods, in fact, actually for you both there and for the local residents, which is good. I'm involved with that. If the footpath is not fit for purpose, why has it been left so long? I'm a little bit concerned about it, and that it has been left so long. And if it is under the city, as it said, under the city ownership, why has it taken so long to bring it forward to part of your budget proposals? I'm a little bit concerned. Why has no maintenance been happening on this? Surely the local members have been asking for maintenance and improvements to it over the years. I'm disappointed to hear that it's got to the state that it has.
The election card.
Okay, Councillor Miles, would you like to summarise?
Thank you. First of all, the analytical capacity of some of us in the Chamber, I'm a bit concerned about when you look at policy coherence and gaps. But we'll come to that in a moment, because there are real dangers in our city. Death and serious injury from road traffic collisions knocked to the streets are neither inevitable and they shouldn't be tolerated. And I wanted to actually list all the people who have died on our streets, and it's not just from cyclists, it's pedestrians, it's people in cars, but it would take too long. It doesn't matter what mode of transport you're taking, Vision Zero is about reducing this death and serious injury from these collisions. Yes, the County Council has adopted a commitment to eliminate these fatalities and serious injuries, and they published this Vision Zero strategy. Now, I want to just explain two core principles behind that, which I think is important to frame this. One is that it builds on two basic facts. One is people make mistakes, and mistakes will happen when people are on the road. And secondly, people are vulnerable to being killed or seriously injured if they're involved in the crash. It doesn't matter what kind of, whether it's car on car, pedestrian and car, bike and car, all these different combinations, But as a city council, we are saying that we support this goal, and many of us have signed this letter to the county calling for this in 2022, but we as a city have not yet actually published any formal Vision Zero commitments and action plan. We haven't done that. We keep on saying that we support it, but actually where is this piece of paper saying that we do? The county, in its current Vision Zero strategy consultation, is specifically asking for partners, which includes district councils, I should add, to make their own commitments to help deliver on this strategy. To not make this commitment is evading responsibility. We need to come up with our own commitment and action plan that complements, not replaces, it complements the counties. There are very distinct areas that are the sole responsibility of the City Council and can deliver on safety improvements to contribute to this shared vision. And these are areas that other councils elsewhere in the country have done in their Vision Zero, where they're unitary or they're, not this two-tier system that we have. So there are areas under our direct control and influence that aren't included within the county's plan, and that's for us then to take action on. And we need resource to develop what that commitment is, identify where those gaps are and what we can do. Because every time I go past the memorial to Lingfeld out on the plane, it brings tears to my eyes. Those children that are growing up now without a mother because of what's happened, and it's regardless of the circumstances, people's lives are being devastated by what's happening here. So we need the resource, we need to take action, but we also need to acknowledge what action we've already taken, document that, and we need a resource to do that. We are doing some good things already around clocks, for instance. Thank you, Anna, for mentioning that, and thank you, I think, Alex, I think you were behind some of that, so that's fantastic, but there's more we can do as a city. ODS's fleet, the City Council's vehicles, can be accredited through FORS, a voluntary accreditation programme designed to improve standards in the road transport industry. We can adopt these direct vision standards that Councillor Cliff very thankfully mentioned as well, and Fresnel lenses to eliminate blind spots to prevent this sort of thing happening. That is improving, that can improve drivers' vision through cab windows. For bin lorries, for instance, now we procure bin lorries through ODS, and actually bin lorries are being people on our streets. We hold the relationship with taxis through our licensing function, and we can follow the good practice of other cities.
Thank you very much.
Safety requirements on that.
Councillor.
And there's also Vision Zero as well. So it's not duplicated work. It's about road safety and it's about eliminating death. Thank you. Thank you.
We've got a special announcement from Councillor Andrew Gant.
Hardly an announcement, Lord Mayor, but thank you. Just to say that there has been a bit of mention of my role in another council, and as a result, just to avoid any potential blurring responsibilities, I won't take part in the vote on this amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. I will put the decision to the vote. So if anyone who wishes to leave or... Please can I request that members keep their hands raised until I indicate, otherwise the committee services can ensure the vote is counted. Those in favour? Those against? Okay, that's good exercise. Any abstentions? One. One? Okay. Thank you. The recommendations have been rejected. Okay, Councillor Mundy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
The next individual amendment is from Councillor Ed Mundy.
Thank you,
So,
Lord Mayor.
Councillor Mundy to introduce the amendment. Sorry.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As was circulated earlier in the evening, obviously we were looking for additional funding to be going to our advice centres. That amount of funding has reduced with the sort of permutations of the budget that's been agreed. But I'm afraid we're going to revisit the flower bed. So I don't know if you want me to speak on this now or after. Yeah, okay. Right, so
I think you should introduce it and speak.
Yeah. So obviously you can see our proposal there, as you've got there, which is to take out the spending on the Friars Square flower beds for 1 year, and with that £16,000 we can fund a year one increase of £16,000 to be shared across the advice centres in the city, and that would be based on the need of those advice centres and delegated to Cabinet on their decision. Of course, our advice centres are struggling enormously at the moment with caseload. When you look at the impact of the cost of living crisis on people and inflation, the work that the advice centres do is not just simply going to be a sort of a benefit to individuals and not something that's going to be reflected to us more broadly. These are people who may end up actually turning to our services and turning to us for their urgent need if they're not getting the advice from advice centres that could actually be directing them to national support. And of course people are suffering from considerable strain as a result of things such as spiralling debt and housing insecurity and potential homelessness. Now, we have obviously discussed the flowers before. I mean, Friars Square has, recently had quite considerable work done to it. It does look good. It's a very useful space for pedestrians and people waiting, or indeed people skateboarding. There's plenty of space there. It's a location that is likely to attract future interest for improvement because of its proximity to the train station. So I don't think we should, see this current loss of 16k for the flower beds as a reason why Friars Square wouldn't attract any future interest privately or ward budget or otherwise for these kind of improvements. And I think that ultimately, we should really be looking at the fact that, our advice centres they provide that support for such diverse communities across our city. They're not all just sort of focused on general support. We're obviously we have quite focused advice centres here as well. I think we should really be looking at ourselves and saying, right, are we prepared to turn around to voters and residents in the city and say that we would prioritise flowers near a train station above advice and support for the most vulnerable who could be desperately needing it? What I should have said at the beginning, and I'm just saying this for means of transparency. This is not a declaration of interest, but this was something that was discussed in our leaders' meeting earlier. I'm the outside body representative on Citizens Advice Oxford. I'm not a trustee. It's not a disclosable interest, but I do want to point out, for reasons of transparency, that I do attend Citizens Advice Oxford meetings. Obviously, this amendment does not propose to specifically direct money towards Citizens Advice Oxford or promise anything like that. So I do make that declaration for transparency, and that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turner, would you like to speak now or respond at the end?
Sorry, does he have a second?
We need a seconder. Who would like to second the motion? I mean,
yes. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Councillor.
Okay, I'll second the amendment and I reserve my right to respond to that.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Ed Turner, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I was keen to do it now.
Yes, please.
Yes, Mr. Wongo. I understand where this is coming from, and to be clear and again for transparency, I've, council rep on the board of Roseland Advice Advice Centre, been involved in them for many a long year. They're terrific organisation. The advice sector is so important. It's one of the reasons, candidly, why I think we're really reluctant to make any sort of reductions in the community space, which of course come in year 2 of this budget, rather than year 1. One of the reasons as well why I was pleased to see the Labour amendment to the county budget pass is, as I understand it, and others will be able to correct me if I'm wrong, there's quite a significant slug of new investment in advice. So what happened actually in the advice sector in Oxford was the county council pulled back completely from supporting advice sectors. It withdrew all of its funding, and my understanding is that with the agreement on the county budget yesterday, there'll be new money coming the way of advice centres, and indeed substantially more than £16,000. So I think this is, clearly this is an area we're going to talk about again in future years. Clearly advice is something close to all of our hearts. I don't honestly think cancelling a one-off scheme in order to provide funding next year, at the moment when the advice centres are going to be hopefully getting some extra money, and before we face our own community's challenges to implement, is the right thing to do. And then lastly, we do have these individual members of budget councils, and it's fine, it's people's good right to put them. You can always do a kind of 20k, let's cancel the Christmas party because we should be spending on something else. Or let's knock a grand off, the leader's allowance because we can do something else. And, it makes for okay, it makes, I know this isn't Edward Mundy's aim with this. It makes for a political point, it's kind of all right, but it really misses the big picture of the sort of budgets that when we go down to 14k in 1 year, going for one thing rather than another, it slightly misses the point of the meeting. I personally don't think it's the most useful way to proceed. So personally I won't be voting for it, though advice is something I really support.
Councillor Saj Malik, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think I agree with Councillor Mundy when he talked about the advice centres, etc., the importance. But comparison about giving, well, what we're going to tell the public is we're going to keep the flowers while you're struggling, and rather than we do advice, is a wrong one. Then where are we going to stop? I mean, let's not have council receptions, let's not spend money there, and we were debating on the toilet. Let's check all the toilets, and people can go elsewhere to the woods or go there because, we're keeping this up. This is a wrong comparison. It's like a political, emotional blackmail, trying to tell the people, oh, by the way, we're going to keep the flowers and we're not going to know. You have this was a point one earlier said, every councillor have their own budget. Well, 2,000 will then contribute. I don't know if it's any, still is not helpful because it's for infrastructure. But equally, I mean, flowers, I would like to see more flowers rather than cut the flowers, because Pride White Square is the kind of entrance to the city. You should take pride to represent the city you do. You have to still, again, come back to the point, make your city more beautiful, because I think sometimes I feel like part of a council where you get 8 to 10 million footfall tourists a year, and if I was a tourist, I would really criticize the lack of facilities rather than taking off the facilities. So let's improve the facilities. I won't be voting for this motion. I think this is a very wrong one. It's an opportunist motion in my point of view, politically, more than anything. But I agree on his first part, yes. Advice centre, yes. But then again, what Councillor Turner had pointed out, if they have passed yesterday, then the money is coming, so wait.
Thank you. This item will finish at 2012. Councillor Landell Mills.
It seems senseless to divert this money from Pride White Square.
Can't hear you.
seems sensible to divert the money from Brideway Square. I mean, I speak as a landscape architect. I'm very keen on public spaces, and Brideway Square is a successful and important public space. But there's several large businesses in the area who could easily, should the funding for the flower beds be lacking, I'm sure perhaps some of the local businesses and the railway and Network Rail might seek to make amends for the mess they've made and look into their pockets to provide a contribution. And I think some of the side business school might also, as it's important to their business more than anything else. And the money for the advice centres will be much needed and won't be replaced.
Councillor Smoton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll keep the size of my remarks proportionate to the sum at stake. When you're ready. Flower beds are nice to have. Advice services can be life-changing. It's a better use of the money. Yes, it's a small amount. It's not a big deal. It's a small deal. It is a good deal. I shall vote for it.
Councillor Jaffrey Mabini, please.
This conversation and this back and forth is really symbolic of the inequality in our city. We're discussing about having flowers, which are lovely to have, and then we're talking about poverty, really, and the harsh end of reality for lots of people in our city. I sit on the Agnes Smith Advice Centre, and actually it's not the case that every single year a lot of the staff there are spending a lot of time trying to fundraise even these small amounts. And I would rather they have the time to help more of our residents who are in desperate need. And I do think it is not political point scoring when you're talking about treating inequalities and poverty in the city. Thank you.
Councillor Susanna Pressel.
Thank you. Yes, yes. At the County Council budget meeting yesterday, we had some interesting discussions. Sort of mind games went on for hours and hours. It was 9 hours altogether, I think. And in the end, the Lib Dem Green administration agreed to accept the Labour amendment in full. And that Labour amendment included £300,000 for the advice centres to restore the cost of living funding, which the others had proposed to take away. So £300,000 is going in from April onwards, and I'm very proud of that indeed. Now, people suggested that we should get sponsorship from businesses in Friars White Square to pay for flower beds, and we've tried that. Side Business School refused. The other businesses who are struggling to survive and who are furious about the state of the flower beds have also refused to give money that they don't have towards the flower beds. So we've tried that, and it hasn't worked. And just finally, I want you to think about that famous poem or saying or song, perhaps Mike or somebody can help me out. Well, how does it go? The thing about bread and roses. People need bread, of course they do, but they need roses as well, either literally or metaphorically. Because I bet if you ask some of the people who use advice centres and who are in desperate circumstances, I know, I'm not minimising that, I bet they would say to you that they would love to see much more beautiful flower beds in Friars White Square.
Councillor Nala Hartley, please. Would you like to speak?
Yes, prior to Susanna's comment, this has kind of changed my my speech how to go, but I still suspect that a lot more of us would put the advice centres at the centre of our budget in terms of what is happening in our city. The inequality in our city is rampant. We have a growing underclass here, which is feeling very disillusioned with what is happening around them. The cost of living crisis has hit families, struggling families really hard. And this is at the back of austerity. The violence of austerity cut a lot of services for a lot of people, and it has taken years for people to recover. So advice centres are a bone of what is happening in the city in terms of advising people around issues around housing. Housing is one of the major issues that is quoted around health issues leading to causes of crime, leading to various things that if people did not have those advice centres as a go-between. They will lose their homes. The homelessness rate will rise in Oxford. So we are urging that this amendment is supported and that the 16k a year is put into consideration. But also we do support the proposal that was put forward by the Greens. The support that is needed more than anything is really making sure that our communities do get financial advice, as we know with the result of austerity how a lot of citizen advice bureaus have been cut. So we must not penalize the vulnerable in our Oxford City. We must really try and be seen to be supporting them, especially as a lot of us are going to be door knocking soon, and we won't be able to be door knocking on Zooms. We're going to be facing our residents, and we're going to have to be answerable to them.
Thank you. Councillor Mundy, would you like to summarise very, very briefly?
Yeah, it's very brief. I mean, obviously, we don't want to be arguing over 16k. We want to be arguing over at least 16k a year for the NTFS, and more than that, obviously. But you know, this is the state of play that we're in. We've obviously had to table this. I think, you know, ultimately we have to ask ourselves, you know, in this particular conversation that we're having and keeping it brief, do we really think that we're better off spending money on a flower bed by a train station, or actually contributing to the advice centres that help the poorest people? And I think on this occasion we should really be siding with the latter. Thank you, guys.
Please hold a moment. We're just checking the sums.
What will happen to the flower beds after the year then?
What will happen to them after this?
After the year then?
Well, look, I think the point was raised that the private investment should be
You help 10 people.
Sorry?
If you help 10 people, that would save their lives over a long time. And the flowers desire.
Right, I will put the decision to the vote. Please can I request that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise, so committee services can ensure the vote is counted. Those in favour? Those against? Oh yeah. Any abstentions? 0. Thank you, the recommendation has been rejected. Okay, we now come to the final budget as it has already been proposed, yeah?
Lord Mayor, if I may, I just thought it might be useful to clarify what is now being debated as a substantive motion. So members have now been asked to consider the final recommendation, which is the report as published at item 9, page 107 to 272, but as amended by the further recommendations of Cabinet set out at page 7 to 9 of the briefing pack. So that is the recommendation that you'll now be debating as the final recommendation.
Okay, so we now come to the final budget as it's already been proposed and seconded. We can proceed straight to the debate. Please can I ask officers to clarify what the council has already done? Yeah, it's already done it. Okay, so I'm looking for speakers now. I'm looking around the room and there's one hand gone up, two hands gone up. Councillor Cherry McConley, would you like to speak?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to briefly contribute three things. I'll be voting for this motion because, as we heard from the chair of the scrutiny panel, the scrutiny panel, James Fry, talked about the favorable nature of contract. I think that's what we should appreciate and recommend. I also want to recommend and agree to what my cabinet member had said about the investment in the structure and the investment, actual investment in our legislatures. I think that's quite good. But for the council as a whole, when you read, and this is quite important, the Chief Financial Officer briefing note, section 25 of the Local Government Act, is what I read every time of the financial endorsement of this council, and also alludes to what is going on around the country. Other councils going bankrupt. It's local, duty, and it's non-political. So I'd urge everyone to support this budget. One thing I'm glad is the debate we are having. Either the Green Amendment proposing to remove my allowance, we're not debating how we are going to cut our services because of the section 114. Thank you.
Councillor Susanna Pessel.
Yes, well, it won't surprise you to know I'm supporting the Labour budget, and I hope everybody will agree to come together and support it. And I'd like to echo other people's thanks to our officers, and particularly to Ed Turner, who's worked so hard on this. There are many good things in the budget. I'll just remind you of a couple of them. The Splash Park, I'm so pleased about. It's such a draw for children. And 2 new community centres when so many other councils are closing theirs. And of course the new housing that we're building and the work on energy efficiency. It's all fantastic, isn't it? We can be very proud of Oxford City Council. Now I promised I would come back to the flower beds, and I won't linger over it. We've spent such a long time talking about them. But I must just tell you that so many people who are now walking them backwards and forwards through the square have complained to me about them. And I was talking to one of the traders today. She said she had 2 nervous breakdowns last week, partly over the flower beds, but also how difficult it is for them at the moment. And the Sergeant said very eloquently, that is the gateway to Oxford for ever such a lot of people who arrive on the trains. We should have it in such a state that we can be proud of it, shouldn't we? So please, I'm sorry you all wanted, all of you over there wanted to get rid of the planting that I'm proposing and spend the money on other things as well. But I hope you can be consoled by the fact that we can be proud of Ridesway Square and it'll look much nicer if we go ahead with this planting and maintenance. Thank you.
Councillor Anna Relton.
I'm still writing it. So yes, in what has been a pretty grim budget, I think there's actually quite a lot that I take pride in it. In this, we have a 4-year budget that broadly reflects the views of the electorate, shared with both the resident survey and the budget consultation, and indeed the elected members here today. A lot of councils are in section 114 territory or 1-year budget territory, and I'm very pleased that we are in neither. We seize the Oxford model, delivering and protecting services. It's got social house building. I went and looked at the numbers. From 20 a year in 2016 to 273 last year, and let's not overstate the difference that makes to the poorest in our city having a backbone of social housing. We have a grown-up relationship with our unions, as all Labour-run administrations should, and I'm very proud of that. The energy efficiency stuff on council homes, which both make our council tenants warmer and have homes that are cheaper to heat. I'm very pleased with that, and I'm pleased with the investment we have in that area. And yeah, I'm also just very proud that We maintain our excellent award-winning sustainability team who continue to rise to the challenge and deliver climate action for the residents of Oxford. You know, this is a non-statutory bit of the council, but people in the city do really want to see progress here. So I'm pleased with what we've already delivered and what we will deliver in the future in this space.
Thank you. Councillor Catherine Miles.
Thank you. So I'm really pleased to see that the Labour group has concurred with the others on this side around the disposal of assets that are not on public display. So in that respect, I think that is a really positive development to see that we're looking at exploring selling the Moral Trophy, which is better placed in the museum rather than gathering dust. And I'd really like to thank Councillor Mudderman for the words that she mentioned around heirlooms. Just in other areas of our life where we may choose to sell unwanted presents of things that we don't require to free up funds for other purposes. So it's good to see that the council is doing the same sort of good housekeeping. I would like to pick up on the number plate issue. I would hope that this review also looks at things that may be on public display and whether it's good value for us as a city to own a personalised number plate, which is basically just an overt symbol of status. I think you know, that has no benefit for residents, and if sold, as with the Moral Trophy, the proceeds could be used for various things, not only reducing prudential borrowing, but also investing in different asset classes that could potentially generate an income for the council. Just in terms of number plates, Essex Council sold theirs for £375,000 in 2008, so there is precedent there. Why I'm not supporting this today? Well, I think I'm minded to abstain. It's not the budget I would have passed, but I recognise there's a lot of good work there, so don't want to stand in your way. But things such as spending such a large amount on flower beds when you can pop down to the garden centre and get a big bag of bulbs and then plant them yourselves, that's it seems to be quite an expensive way to be going on, where the money could be better spent on advice centres. As for Vision Zero, I do really hope that at some point reality hits and you realise that there are areas of responsibility in the city that we could be taking action on to achieve that goal. Nobody wants to be killed on the streets of our city. And I think there are greater efficiency gains that could be made through ODS and other aspects.
Thank you.
We need to look at it. So thank you to everyone for your work.
Councillor Ajaz Rahman.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll thank officers again, Ed and his team, Nigel and James as well. What I want to say is I know it's difficult, and I think the budget overall was hard work, so we've got a budget, so that's good. It's interesting that after all the budget, the individual amendments, excuse me, they're the most telling sign really. On the Vision Zero, the opportunity was there for the party to put it into their own main budget. They chose not to. The Woods the same. I support the Woods, but that could have been in the party as well. And ultimately, at the end of it, we've decided to see a beautiful picture coming out of the station over helping people. Inner beauty is more important than anything. And locally, when people are suffering, you cannot justify, you cannot say that planting flower beds for 1 year is going to make a difference to people what they think of Oxford. You know what would make a difference? If they see the thriving, inclusive, diverse community all as one, and there's £300,000 going, that's going over a year. But something that's been underfunded for so long, it's not going to make a difference. And you know what? A year worth of flowers in Friday Square is not going to make a difference. So I know it's hard work. I know that everybody worked for it. Very well done on that. Everybody sort of talked about budgets and said about caring for people. At the end of it, I did notice that Ed did not mention flowers when he was speaking about the flower beds. And I wouldn't expect him to mention flowers in that context when he's talking about advice centres. So, you know, for next time, let's put what should be first. That's the people of Oxford. And then visitors are welcome. We want them, we welcome them with open arms, but people of Oxford, first and foremost, please. Thank you.
Councillor Saj Malik.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I will start, today when Ed Turner started his speech very humbly, but that makes a difference when you don't have a majority and you're looking for help around the room. body language was very different. In past, I have seen him very passionate delivery and so on. But anyway, I have always said one thing which I consistently say. I mean, it's not a perfect budget, but I think it is a good budget in difficult time. And one thing I have always said consistently, Ed is a good manager of the assets, and on certain level I can trust him, but equally, when I was talking the other week, I mean, we talk about 16,000 shooting people of Oxford. These are the political choices. I don't remember Liberal making any noises when administration bring £500,000 spending in front of the Iceland for the car park spaces for operational use, not a public any advantage or anything. Either you are the officers or the people who work there will be using that. There's perfect, if you go now, there's perfectly parking place there. But $500,000 is going to be wasted their taxpayer money in my point of view. Equally, I had a word with Ed Turner, the closure of those chaos by the Odeon Cinema, which your Odeon Cinema development not going to come 2 or another 3 years, and it was generating in rents and rates nearly 90 grand a year. So taxpayer down again £270,000. So if you calculate this, there's £770,000 taxpayer is worse off. I didn't see no noise from the Liberal Democrats. And last time somebody was saying, oh, you know, see how many people are here and how these people do this. Because you guys got no vision, you guys got no alternative. You haven't given nothing today. We are going to say passionately we've said, what a great ideas. You guys got no ideas. You only got 3 councillors on the east side of the city, and the rest you are the North Oxford Party, and you just remain there. And
thank you.
No, I'm not finished.
Council, have you finished?
I'm not finished yet. Ed talk about housing. Nobody denies the pressure on housing and how many people are waiting. But in my point of view, I said it before, we do not go far enough in our local plan to explore our other places. In my point of view, what mess we made in a Marston village, which our suppose is going through, we should have a access from the A40 bypass, and Marston village people were left in a place, and we're going to develop further there. So equally, there is always a room for improvement, and I hope the administration and the council, in the name of the
You've got 10 seconds.
Do not encroach every green space in the town to build on it. So please, green spaces what Oxford makes wonderful. Thank you.
Councillor Nigel Chapman.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, for that very loud introduction. I really think it's time we just stop talking about flower beds now. Oh. It's about time we started talking about the big picture, about what this budget's about, and really talk responsibly about it. I mean, I do think it is an amazing achievement by Councillor Turner. He is a fantastic quasi-Chancellor of the Exchequer of this council. His scrutiny group and the council's finance team, led by the Fatty Nigel Kennedy, for the quality of their work. It is absolutely fantastic. And it is some achievement for us collectively to be in a position today to vote for a budget which sustains public service over a considerable period, not without its risks, based on solid foundations, prudent use of resources, and which protect frontline services. And that we are in a position, and in a positive place like that tonight, is partly down to the far-sightedness of this Labour Council in establishing 2 wholly owned council companies, which, as well as establishing excellent services, are making a major financial contribution to this balanced budget. The so-called Oxford model is bearing considerable fruit. It's easy to forget this as we swing around in the conversation around hunting trophies and reducing spending on flower beds. OX Place is planned to contribute over £10 million in dividends over the next 4 years, in addition to the payments it will make in terms of interest on the money it needs to borrow. This borrowing will enable OX Place to build over 1,000 affordable homes as part of its contribution to a much bigger figure of 1,600 homes, of which 850 will be social housing. How many councils around the country can you see that have that level of ambition or that level of resource to even begin a council house building programme of that kind? And the second company is ODS, which, as you know, I'm passionate about. And Councillor Malik accused me of being bullish. I'm going to be bullish, because any company which is saying to us they will work hard to deliver dividends of £14 million between 23-24 and 26-27 is an ambitious company and one that needs backing. And I'm also bullish, by the way, about the quality of the services it provides. I know it's not perfect, and people bring me their individual cases, but I saw some amazing feedback this week. Over 3,000 pieces of feedback, with satisfaction levels in the mid-90% in terms of the quality of repair and timeliness. An amazing result, and down to new ways of working and a great team effort by every person doing repairs every day. That's the big picture. Stand back and see the good things. The cup half full in this budget, and you see lots of really excellent things. On the big strategic question, finally, of outsourcing, when many councils wash their hands of their council housing and subcontracted their maintenance,
10 seconds.
This was right, and we must continue to remind ourselves of that fact and applaud the contribution of these companies in providing and defending the very existence of the public services that we most cherish in this city. And for those reasons, having won and lost on individual amendment issues, for those reasons alone, it is time to stand up now and together support this budget without any opposition. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Susan Brown, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking our officers. Sorry, I'm formally seconding it at this point. I'd like to start by thanking our officers, Ed and Budget Scrutiny, for all their hard work getting us to this point, and everyone here for your patience tonight. May I remind people of our Council's 4 key priorities, and these are what our budget is aligned to. They are to enable an inclusive economy, to deliver more affordable housing, to support thriving communities, and to pursue a zero-carbon Oxford. As many have already said, many councils are cutting services, closing leisure centres, closing community centres if they even still provided them, cutting grants and cutting any services that are not statutory. We are continuing to provide the services so sorely needed by Oxford citizens. Our budget delivers investment. It is building 1,600 council houses. It's investing in reducing energy costs for our existing council homes. It's helping our city to reach net zero. We're building 2 new community centres and a splash park. We are securing the future of our leisure centres, including maintaining generous concessions for those on lower income and free swimming for local children. It's investment in our key buildings, such as the covered market. There's the support there for low-income households through maintaining the full council tax reduction scheme. And we're prioritising working with local businesses, and in particular, those who pay the Oxford Living Wage as part of our investment in our city and its people. I welcome the general agreement around the council chamber. As is often the case, we have been having our debate around some important issues, but ultimately relatively small sums in the grand scheme of things. This City Council Labour budget, supported by the Oxford model, as Nigel has just referenced, and in spite of this disgraceful Tory government, will continue to invest in services and in our great city and its people. Finally, I would just like to say that I am proud of our great city, proud of our City Council officers, and proud of our councillors. Costs have dramatically risen, and with the impact of the rising cost of living, our services are needed even more. Today, we are delivering a budget that stands up for our city and our citizens, protects services, and builds new council homes in the teeth of huge cuts in funding for local government. I commend this budget to the whole council.
Councillor Alex Hainsworth.
Couple of points I was going to make from some of the speeches earlier. There is a danger with these things, as Councillor Chapman has said, we get fixated on the tiny at the expense of the things that are real. I was trying to work out roughly what percentage of the budget the flower beds are, given that, you know, not just that people spend a lot of time on that, but that have got quite worked up and angry one way or another, either for or against the flower beds. I would reckon, if you add together the general funds, the HRA and the capital programme here, you've got something over £500 million, and depending on how you count the gross or the net budget on the general fund, you're probably pushing £1 billion. So we're talking £16,000 out of £1 billion, and I hope that puts it in context. The concerns I have about selling stuff which you can only sell once, to fund things which you need to fund on an ongoing basis, are ones I've made before. And I think we need to just be careful about this enthusiasm of selling stuff off. I mean, it's a flipping hideous trophy. We've all agreed that it's probably best sold off. Let's not assume it's going to go in a museum. It will go to some collector of frankly horrific early 20s kitsch or whatever it is. And, you know, I suppose all power to whichever oligarch or oil baron acquires the thing. And there we go. But the serious point is you can only sell it once. And I think it is a misrepresentation of the number plate on the Lord Mayor's car to say it's some kind of vanity personal number plate. It's not. It's FC1 because it is the very first number plate issued in this city, and therefore it does have a place in our history. I'm not entirely sure I want to see it stuck on a Lamborghini driven around by an overpaid 21-year-old who happens to be good at kicking the ball, which is what I fear would happen.
Thank you.
The other points about companies have been made, and I think they're really important. But my final comment is, oh, well, I've got only 5 seconds left, in which case I'll shut up. I know, I've got more time. Sorry. I was going to say on the kiosks which were mentioned, hidden within, well, it's not hidden, it's just in the capital programme, and no one's read that far. You can see the potential for the investment of the building next door, which may or may not have gone ahead if those kiosks had still been there, which is potentially going to deliver the ongoing revenue which, long after we are gone from this chamber, our successors will be delighted that we delivered for them, because they will be able to spend that on things which are the priorities of their voters and their constituents, some of whom I think have not yet been born. And I think that's the point here about stewardship. It's the important thing about the companies. It's easy to sell stuff. It's sometimes difficult to invest, and invest to deliver things. And that is what this budget continues to do, and I'm pleased it does.
Thank you. Just a reminder, we've only got 9 minutes left. So for the next speaker, Councillor Shaista Aziz.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So, of course, it's only right and proper that we acknowledge that this council does good work, some good work, and you know, that should be celebrated. But just to be very clear, this issue around the flowers is not actually about the flowers. This is about a tone-deaf decision that's been made at a time when people are struggling in this city with the cost of living crisis, as many of the councillors have already talked about. And furthermore, and I just want to quote back something Councillor Susanna Pressel said, which was, we were talking about the gateway to Oxford outside the train station. I want to make it very clear that for many, many, many working class residents of this city, they don't come into the city centre. They feel very disconnected from this city centre. They cannot afford to travel in to the city centre. I've had the great honour of representing a ward for the last 7 years, where there are plenty of children and people who don't come into the city centre. They sometimes come in once a year during Christmas time to see the lights. So I think it's really important for us to really remember this, because often some of the realities that members have in their own experience of living here is very different from residents. And so, to be clear, this is not about flowers, this is about inequality and inequity, and it's about making decisions that actually don't really reflect the reality of the most vulnerable residents in our city. And at a time where today, while we've been debating this budget, people have been watching the farce that's been taking place in Westminster and the circus, the disgraceful circus that's been taking place in relation to the horror that has been unfolding in Gaza, that continues to unfold. There are plenty of people who are really disengaged from politics and being disconnected day by day. So I'm not specifically picking on any individual here, but I do want to make it clear that it's really important that we do recognise the good work the council does and officers do, but we've got to go much further, sadly, with far less money than ever before. And I, for one, will be celebrating the end of the Tory government when it arrives, but I do hope the next government, if it is going to be the Labour government, it's not going to be a lighter shade of blue and is going to work harder at making the change this country deserves.
Okay, Councillor Gabunala Hartley, please.
Councillor Aziz has echoed what I would have just said, but I just wanted to start with this tale of two cities is really hitting heavy, especially when you hear councillors who don't live on the estate talk about warmer homes. There are old people who are living in these cities, in the city, who are heating their houses 1 hour a day because they cannot afford, and they rely on these services like these advice centers. It is a painful experience to have people knock at your door to ask you to give them money for heating when you don't have much as well, because they don't understand the council system. I am now out of the Labour Party, which used to tell us when you knock the doors and they tell you that they are voting Labour, leave them alone. They are asking questions. They are asking what's happening to their votes. They are asking about their city. They are recognizing the inequality that exists in Oxford. I just wanted to express that. Barting has had an initiative of beautiful Barting. We love flowers. We are not ignorant about flowers, but we cannot put a priority on flowers when people are struggling, when a lot of their children are ending up in prisons, when a lot of their children are in poverty.
Our last speaker, unfortunately because of time, Councillor Smerton, is Councillor Louise Upton.
I thought you were introducing me by misfortune. No?
We're wasting time.
I just wanted to say that I think this budget is investing in the future of the city by investing in the development of the children of this city. It's in the first few years of a child's life when they learn to trust, when they learn to be confident, when they learn how to interact with other people. So by creating places where children can go and have those kind of positive interactions with other children, with their own caregivers, those opportunities are so important. So to have spaces where everyone, regardless of income, can go and be welcomed is really looking to the future of this city. And I'm talking about our capital investment in things like the Splash Park at Hinton Park, improvement to our leisure centres and to our community centres. By providing these kind of spaces for toddlers and their carers, we're setting them up for healthier and happier lives. We're setting them up for being part of connected communities who actually trust each other, and for a city where people will thrive and feel part of it. So it's just a small point now, I won't go on, but I'm delighted that we're doing these kind of things to improve the chances of the youngest members of this city and give them the best chance of developing into outgoing, confident adults.
Okay, Councillor Turner, would you like to summarise?
Yeah, thanks. So at the start of this evening, Ajaz asked me to keep things short. You may not want any votes tonight, but I will give him that on this and other reports. So it's been, I think, a good and respectful debate. I think we got a little bit fractious, Lord Mayor, towards the end. And I would just make a couple of observations on that. I mean, just to say, you zone in on a very small part. I think you risk missing the big picture. I would note that I don't think there was a single budget amendment submitted on the entire housing revenue account, which was nice. So, you know, Councillor Neville Hartley just talked about heating homes, £33 million in there for energy efficiency works to council houses, or another really, really good initiative which came from an HRA budget bid, which I was really pleased to be part of a few years ago, the energy efficiency advisors who go around our council houses supporting our council tenants. And so I suppose my reflection would be, if you want to, you know, by all means, you come along, you have an individual one-line amendment, make speeches at budget meeting, and that's fine, that's part of the process. But also it's worth sort of drilling down in the way that actually budget scrutiny often does, and thinking about the bigger picture stuff you can do and giving yourselves a longer run in. And equally, you know, I recognise a lot in what my ward colleague and friend Shyster said, but you know, it's a bit tough to take that when you've equally just had a budget amendment that actually would knock £700,000 out of the MTFS because you're trying to lower the council tax. So I think that's difficult.
that we've reached the end of that debate. We've had a good and respectful discussion now. I think the nature of the amendments and the nature of the debate tonight mean that there's a real degree of unity in this chamber. Saj made a series of largely kind comments, and that was really appreciated. He also said he thought the tone was emollient, actually, or the tone was a little bit different. Actually, always try and listen. You know, I mean, when I was first elected 20 years ago, whatever, I was a real pain. I remember being like rabidly partisan and a bit of a nuisance. I'd like to think we've still, you know, you live and learn. Actually, one of the genuine things which I've found is people often, in their first couple of meetings, they get really sort of pumped up and like, and then actually realise, you know, people, councillors are only human. People go in for the best of sort of motivations. You can catch a word with people, try and get things done. I think everyone's here because they want to do good things. I'd like to see this budget in the most difficult of circumstances of being part of that journey. Our back's really up to the wall. As a council, we'll see more on some of the challenges around things like temporary accommodation coming out of the woodwork. We've got some really difficult decisions to implement in here tonight, but hopefully we can do so in the spirit of respect, which I think has largely characterised tonight's discussion. So with that, I hope people will support it.
Thank you. I will put the decision to the vote. Please note this is a recorded vote, so I will request the Committee and Member Services Manager to conduct a roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I will start with the civic office holders and then I will go through the members alphabetically. Councillor Lubna Arshad. 4. Councillor James Fry. 4. Councillor Mark Ligo.
4.
Councillor Mohammed Altaf Khan.
Abstain.
Councillor Shaista Aziz.
Abstain.
Councillor Susan Brown.
4.
Councillor Nigel Chapman.
4.
Councillor Mary Clarkson.
4.
Councillor Tiago Parias.
4.
Councillor Barbara Coyne.
Abstain.
Councillor Lizzie Diggins.
4.
Councillor Hosnia Jafari Marbini.
Abstain.
Councillor Sandy Douglas.
4.
Councillor Paula Dunn.
Abstain.
Councillor Lawrence Fowler.
Abstain.
Councillor Andrew Gant.
Abstain.
Councillor Stephen Goddard. Councillor Alex Hollingsworth.
4.
Councillor Ray Humberstone.
4.
Councillor Jemima Hunt.
4.
Councillor Chris Jarvis.
Abstain.
Councillor Tom Landell Mills.
Abstain.
Councillor Sarge Malik.
Abstain.
Councillor Catherine Miles.
Abstain.
Councillor Lois Muddyman.
Abstain.
Councillor Ed Mundy.
Abstain.
Councillor Chewy Makonge.
4.
Councillor Jabu Nala Hartley.
Abstain.
Councillor Lucy Pegg.
Abstain.
Councillor Suzanne Cressel.
4.
Councillor Anna Relton. Councillor Rosie Rule.
Abstain.
Councillor Ajaz Raymond.
Abstain.
Councillor Mike Rowley.
4.
Councillor Linda Smith.
4.
Councillor Ross Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Chris Smoten.
Abstain.
Councillor Ed Turner.
4.
Councillor Louise Upton.
4.
And Councillor Naomi Waite.
4.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The budget has been approved. Thank you very much, everyone. And I'll see you on Okay, we now move to setting the council tax for 2024 and 2025. Can I request Councillor Turner to introduce the report and recommendations?
Yeah. Lord Mayor, I'd like to propose we set the council tax which flows from the budget that we have just agreed, with no votes against, which was jolly good. and indeed the budget which the County Council set yesterday and the Police and Crime Commissioners put forward as well.
Can we have a seconder then? Councillor Susan Brown?
I would like to make a really lengthy speech. No, I wouldn't. I'd like to formally second it.
Thank you. And are there any other speakers for this item? Councillor Tax. Okay, I will... Yeah, I'm going to put the decision to the vote because I'm sure Councillor Turner doesn't want to summarise. Please note this is a recorded vote, so all those... I will request the Committee and Member Services Manager to conduct a roll call.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As again, I will go through the civic office holders and then the rest of the members alphabetically. Councillor Lubna Arshad.
For.
Councillor James Fry. For. Councillor Mark Lido. For. Councillor Mohammed Altaf Khan. For. Councillor Shaista Aziz.
Abstain.
Councillor Susan Brown.
For.
Councillor Nigel Chapman.
For.
Councillor Mary Clarkson.
For.
Councillor Tiago Perez. For. Councillor Barbara Coyne.
Abstain.
Councillor Lizzie Diggins.
For.
Councillor Hosnia Jafari Marbini.
Abstain.
Councillor Sandy Douglas.
For.
Councillor Paula Dunn.
Abstain.
Councillor Lawrence Boweather.
For.
Councillor Alex Hollingsworth. For. Councillor Ray Humberstone. Oh, sorry. Okay. Apologies. Councillor Gant.
Accepted.
For. Thank you. Thank you. So Councillor Ray Humberstone.
For.
Just one vote, I'm afraid. Councillor Jemima Hunt.
For.
Councillor Chris Jarvis. For. Councillor Tom Landell Mills.
For.
Councillor Saraj Malik.
Fair.
Councillor Catherine Miles.
For.
Councillor Lois Muddyman.
For.
Councillor Ed Mundy.
For.
Could you repeat that, please? Sorry.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Choe Makonge.
For.
Councillor Lucy Pegg.
For.
Councillor Susanna Pressel.
For.
Councillor Anna Welton.
For.
Councillor Rosie Rule.
For.
Councillor A.J. Raymond.
Abstain.
Councillor Mike Rowley.
For.
Councillor Linda Smith.
For.
Councillor Rod Smith.
For.
Councillor Chris Smoten.
For.
Councillor Ed Turner.
For.
Councillor Louise Upton.
For.
And Councillor Naomi Waite.
Thank you. The recommendations have been approved. Okay, we now move to the Treasury Management Strategy for 2024-2025. Can I request Councillor Turner to introduce the report and recommendations?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. There was a bit of discussion about this at scrutiny, and Cabinet also discussed it. And I think you'll note the changes that are proposed for next year. It's an important document which one has had a good going over in our government structures. Therefore, I just propose to move it. And we're obviously happy to take any questions, comments, or even amendments.
Can we have a seconder?
I formally second it.
Are there any other speakers for this item? Councillor Turner, would you like to summarise?
No.
Okay, I'll put the decision to the vote. Please can I request that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise. Those in favour? Those against? Those, any abstentions? 4. Okay. Thank you. That recommendation has been approved. Thank you. We now move to the Capital Strategy 2024-2025. to 2027 to 2028. Can I request Councillor Turner to introduce the report and recommendations?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I'm looking at those abstain on the last one. I think the capital strategy has the potential to win over their hearts. It sets in place, although it is a very special sort of commitment to sit in a room at nearly 9 o'clock at night in order to then abstain, isn't it? I mean, it's, yeah, there we go. Good for you. It's a really good document which sets in place good processes to govern our capital programme. We have a very substantial capital programme, and therefore it's right that we manage it in as tight a way as we possibly can. This is a good process. We do challenge things well internally and make sure that our capital programme delivers as best it can. Therefore, I'd like to commend it to Council.
Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Susan Brown,
formally second.
Are there any speakers for this item? Are there any speakers for this item? Councillor Turner, would you like to summarise?
No.
I will put the decision to the vote. Please can I request that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise. Those in favour? Okay. Those against? Any abstentions?
So kind of you to think of it, Lord Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. The recommendations have been approved. Thank you for attending this evening. Our next meeting is on Monday, the 18th of March at 5 p.m. Please do your best to arrive. Thank you.